Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Fanalysis, Star Wars. I'm Retty4, this is Grey Jedi 1901.
Hello.
This is Evan Nova 95.
Hello.
This is Jen Sarai 1.
Good evening, gentlemen.
And this is Antoine Bandele.
And what's up, ladies?
Take us away with the description of what we're covering
I'm just
today,
saying,
Matt.
there's like probably one lady who watches us.
What is she
That'd be
doing? Doesn't she have
I know,
anything
what
better to do?
is she doing? What is she
Did
doing?
I said ladies and gentlemen, right? I think I usually do. Ladies and gentlemen of YouTube.
I know, but he was following up from Connor's.
Ah, right, sorry, my bad.
Direct gentleman.
It's
trying to be
very late.
inclusive.
In fact, no, it's not, it's very early. I've had that long a day. Oof. Matt.
We are prepared today, guys.
Yes, yeah, Matt.
Yeah.
Take us away with what we're
We're
doing.
firing on all cylinders here.
And we're totally recording this right after the last one. Yes, yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. What are we doing? We're doing part 2 of Star Wars: Revenge of the
Then-
Sith, the novelization by Matthew Stover. Well, it's our part 2. It's not like part 2 is like delineated by the books parts, because that would mean we'd be here for entirely too long tonight. But yeah, we're covering sort of like the second half of the opening sequence with the rescue up above Coruscant, and we're going to end with the chapter Masters, which is chapter 10.
Which is about the first half of the second part.
Yeah.
Finishes it off.
So yeah, beginning where we left off again. That would be with rescue. Did we say?
Correct.
It was?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's the start. It's them escaping the flagship.
Anakin doing
Yeah.
the fireman's carry with Kenobi and dragging
Right.
Palpatine through the elevator shaft. Very much so, like in the film.
There isn't too much to add, from the book
Yeah.
to the film sequence with this. There are bits and pieces of information and some discussion and kind of philosophical musings between the both, but they're not anything, that shatters the mind. It's really just kind of flavoring that they had to have it.
In terms of plot, this is one of the few chapters that is directly, screen to page and not much else.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I like the discussion between him concerning Obi-Wan, and what they're going to do. There's a little bit more flavour to that in terms of just what kind of motivations are driving Palpatine to say it, what he's kind of hoping Anakin's going to go for, and obviously the Anakin's thought process as a result. He starts to question a bit more here than he does in the film.
I like how it's a little bit like Palpatine is like on the phone with tech support and troubleshooting something. You're like, okay, I'm just going to go for the most obvious solution. Just leave him.
Yeah.
That'd be great if that works. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, well, all right, I'll play the long game then. Whatever. I can do that.
It's funny how kind of grasping at straws he is all the time without having to worry about it. He can just take those easy options sometimes, and if it doesn't pay off, who cares? He's Palpatine. He'll roll with it.
The dark side is the quick and easy path, and that manifests in many different ways.
You're not wrong. But
I like Anakin not being an idiot. I like when we get inside his mind and like he's trying to rationalize. Okay, he's a frightened old man and he's like desperate to get out of here. He's not just like what he is.
Being
You
a
know what I
jerk.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
These set of chapters that we're going to be covering today, they do a lot of they do a very good job of trying to cover up for the film's errors. Particularly later on when we get to chapters like Masters, which is the biggest one.
Right.
For that, they go ham with the let's try and make sense of this. Let's try and make sense of this. Let's try and make sense of this. Got to find a way to explain it. It will actively come up with some sort of mechanism in the story to have the character's reactions to certain situations, particularly Anakin, of course, fit our idea of what he is supposed to be at this point in his life, rather than just a petulant child. I mean, that actively comes up in the prose.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
so
I can't imagine
ironic.
what Stover's thought process must have been when he was
It's
making
like,
these.
how do I fix this?
It's so ironic because describing it that way, it's almost as if the reason why the Revenge of the Sith novelization is so great is because Stover took it upon himself to fix the storyline. And it's like, the reason why we got a great novel is because we got a bad movie.
Well, yeah, that's sort of my issue with George Lucas in a nutshell. Really, he doesn't come up with like horrible ideas. It's just things get lost in translation. This is basically the exact same story. It's just refined, and there are things that you cannot do in a film that you can do in like a novel, of course. So it's easier to get inside like the characters' minds in that way. But it just like certain beats play in this book that are lost in the movies, and it's like this is the same scene pretty much, just done better. It shows what the film could have been in somebody else's hands for me.
Yeah, you even listen to Lucas in interviews and stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, you're totally. I like what you're trying to do. You know, like with the themes you're playing with, the dynamics that you have going on. It's just that when you actually have the scenes and they're executed, you know, with your direction, it's just like Matt was saying, it's just not there. But one of those things that's huge for me is the empathy that I have for Anakin in this, which I don't in the movie. And I think that was just a case of spending more time. And like you're saying, it's hard to be in someone's head, but there are ways to show what is inside someone's head. You know, throughout we just don't get those scenes in the movie as much as we do here. So that when he does turn, especially when we get later on with the Master's chapter and everything, we understand. You know, we can side, not necessarily say we agree with his decision, but we can side with his mentality.
We could see where he's coming from for sure.
Or even if you don't see in terms of agreeing with any kind of perspective he has, you see his motivation. You know, you understand this isn't coming from a place
Whereas
of stupidity.
In the movie,
it's
seems
at least
like it's
motivationally tied. It's motivationally tied to his entire character and who he is. A lot of little small details that we'll get to later kind of address that on a different level and from a different angle, which I think I really appreciate, because it's no one thing with him. It's kind of a building block situation, which is very good considering, like as you said, this isn't really changing the story at all. It's just, you know, adding flavour to what we already know. It's another strength in the book's favour, actually. He doesn't kind of insult the original material. Not that anyone would have minded if he did, but he actually, you know, actively tries to stick to the frame he was given, which is really impressive for, you know, the results we get from it.
And he doesn't always do it. Like, I mean, we're always talking about successes, but later on when we, you know, talk about the Padme stuff, like even he can't rectify that. Yeah. And I think that's actually we'll talk more about that. But I think there's a extra issue I think I have with that chapter as well. But right now. The one thing that was kind of odd is that he segues into the thought of R2-D2 with this whole tirade of not tirade, but like, you know, spiel about how we got him. It's a very romanticized,
like, you know, idea. This R2-D2 and C-3PO are the equivalent of wedding rings in this story for some reason, and it feels that to me. While it's not entirely ridiculous, it just feels very out of place for me to be like in his mind at this moment, or just I don't want to call it like ridiculous, but to me I just would never have written it that way. It's just a very odd idea for me.
Again, it's one of those good ideas. It's just I think the biggest thing is the placement of it in the story. This is a strange moment for him to be musing about that, which is what, you know, considering the action-packed sequence, and it's kind of between two major action beats from the film. You're thinking, okay, why place that here? This would have probably been better if it had been placed somewhere within a Padme Anakin chapter.
The thing is like, if I had been the one writing this story from the start, and not just this book, but it just me in Star Wars, it just seems more natural to me that he would have built R2 because he's a pilot, and like she would have just had 3PO because she's a politician.
Yeah, definitely.
He's a protocol droid.
Everyone's always said that from the
like,
film
he's
side of
my
things.
friend, I built him. Like that I could buy more. Like, he's my friend, I built him, or he's mine. Then Padme gave him to me, and it's like a wedding ring, and I lost it down the drain. You know, like that's kind of what's going on here. You know.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
It's a very. Overall, I consider it a fairly minor complaint. It doesn't like make me go, "Oh, this is like horrible." It's just weird.
Yeah, it is interesting though when Kenobi.
Yeah, and I do have to say I do have to say it actually does make more sense that Anakin would have built something like R2-D2 rather than C-3PO, because Anakin, no matter what, is a pragmatist. He would have designed a practical droid that would actually be able to help him. An R2 unit would actually have been able to help him, whether he was a slave underwater or whether he was already part of the Jedi Order. It would have been useful to have. What the hell do you do with a protocol droid?
Well, we know the idea from the film is that it was originally.
That's why he needs 900 languages to help her with
it. It was forced me, but even that never made any sense. Because as you say, it's a protocol droid.
He can't clean for shit. His arms are always like stuck in this special position.
Precisely.
I can't see.
It's
he dust little, you know. The vape.
He can point out like the list of chores that need to be done.
Yeah, and
trash over there.
And can complain about them, but apart from that, it was always been a bit strange, even though it was meant for his mother, the fact that he wouldn't even be good for even that. Yeah, it's bizarre.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even C-3PO himself comments in this book much later that he wasn't designed to lift anything heavier than a tray of cocktails, so really, like, his functionality in terms of, you know, housework is pretty limited.
And how many cocktail parties do you think he's going to be running for in that situation?
Shmi was a total, you know...
the neighborhood party host.
Yeah,
Right.
totally.
Whereas R2D2 would have actually been able to help with chores.
Yeah,
To an extent.
actually. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
surely the kind of
Yeah,
DIY stuff.
Put a
welding
little
and whatnot.
Roomba underneath them. It'd be perfect.
He is a Roomba. What are you talking about?
But anyway,
I think they
Anyway.
eventually get trapped. This is the portion, right, when they're
Yeah.
running through hallways.
Ray
and-
shields.
Right, yeah.
yeah, which
Yeah,
is
this is one of my like all-time wait what moments for like from the films, because like tonally this is such a odd scene in the film for me, because it's like you guys are like on a ship that's being blasted apart, and you've got like your president, and you're trying to like make it off here, and then like you're stuck in the hallway. Wait a minute, we're smarter than this, and like we're not taking this entirely seriously, and everything's fine, I guess. You know, and it just feels odd. It's kind of like almost the same way here. So,
Yeah, I mean,
you know.
they make them a little. The book makes them a little bit more active in trying to escape, especially when they
yeah.
show them trying to cut their way out. But it's still doesn't help much.
It's a little jarring. I mean, even the bits before that, when Obi-Wan himself is waking up, and it's like, oh, so that is Anakin's butt. You know, it's like the musings in his head. It's
Yeah,
like,
that's where I was going. I was like, at some point we were
Okay.
talking about like things that aren't in the films. It was like, yeah, the most important musing of all was like Anakin's butt, right?
yeah, it's like the two discuss. You know, we get the first introduction to Obi-Wan, or the fact that Count Dooku's dead, and all la da da. Then they get stuck in the ray shield thing there, which I agree is completely it's as weird and jarring as it is in the film, but obviously he has to work
But
with
I think
it
it
somehow.
is George Lucas's way of trying to do like the swashbuckle of Flash Gordon, where ridiculous things like that happened. Which is sometimes, you know, when he does say stuff like that, when he's like, "Oh yeah,
It's got to be popular now.
I think if the entirety of the opening sequence wasn't so disjointed for me, I wouldn't hone in on that. But it's just like one thing in like my list of things that make that scene not excellent for me. Like a lot of people like to say that, and maybe they genuinely feel this way, and that's fine. That like the opening of Revenge of the Sith is like brilliant, and for me, it's just so flawed. But that's just my opinion.
It's one of those things that again,
I guess
the
it's
content.
brilliant because it's actiony, but it's not. The content-wise, there's nothing really actually going on. You know,
it's
like,
less,
when you're like in the movie theater with the surround sound and the popcorn and all that, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
even the content, to be fair. I mean, it needs refinement, but it's not so much what's happening on screen; it's how it's woven together and why we should care about it. You know, it's the setup.
I agree with
it's
that.
it's the establishment, and it's the pacing of how it goes on. You know, it's like we said, it's the fact that we go from Count Dooku's execution to them laughing about the swashbuckling ray shield situation.
Yeah.
So it's like, what?
And when you
If it,
and when
that
you like
moment
look at
in
like
isolation
the
is fine.
deleted scenes, like the deleted scenes where they were going to be like plucking their mustaches and shit,
Yeah.
like while they were like talking to Grievous, and it's like,
Yeah.
pardon? Yeah,
After he murders
came
Chuck
off.
T
Yeah.
right in front of that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
just
just-
came off micro.
oh, and I
TV.
forgot that was a
Yeah.
Shock T moment. That's right.
Yeah.
I forgot all about that. Oh yeah. Oh god, that's so off. That's
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah.
Member old
So-
friend.
Oh yeah, Shock
member
T
of the
died like
council
3
there.
different ways in like the Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, I'm glad
Yeah.
they.
And then
we
she
went
didn't
for the
get
final
anything at
one.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we also get the introduction while they're in the ray shields. We get the introduction of like the Magna Guards. Their description,
Right, which I liked. I like in the prose it says the droid looked like it had fought a Jedi and survived. The Jedi, he guessed, hadn't. Like I thought that was
That-
the point. That's all you need. 2 sentences
And
and you get it.
And that's
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
and that's the kind of that's a good example of him taking something that they would point out in like one of the visual dictionaries where it's like these are like the dreaded droids of Grievous, and like he has like deliberately made them fucked up looking so that they're more intimidating. Like he doesn't like let them repair themselves so that Jedi can be intimidated by that. It's like a good example of somebody weaving in background like sort of noise that doesn't
Superficial
really
detail.
matter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Without
Extraneous
being
like
info
like,
dump. Yeah, it's not an info
Yeah.
dump.
Yeah.
It's just like a quick little
Yeah.
scene setting.
get in and get out. Yeah.
And he's
yeah,
and he's
because
excellent at that.
because the guard in the film really is missing an eye. That's not something
Yeah.
the book just throws in.
And the thing I also like is that giving the Magna Guards here actually have some personality as well. Whereas in the movie, they're just purely there to fight. They don't say a word. They just come at you and that's it. Whereas these Magna Guards actually issue threats. They taunt. They insult. In fact, like later on, there's a bit where it's like one of the Magna Guards is chasing after Obi-Wan and making a wholly improbable threat regarding its staff and Kenobi's.
Right.
Well, it's actually
Right.
one of the few cases really throughout most of the franchise where the Magna Guards get like any real character, because like even in the micro series, nothing. In Labyrinth of Evil, nothing. In Clone Wars, even in the animated series, nothing.
And an argument
yeah,
could be made to
I'm
the idea
fine.
that them not
Yeah.
saying anything is even better for some people. You could say,
Right.
but
I'm not.
Right.
I'm not saying one's
Yeah,
better than the other. It's,
but-
it's just something that stands out.
it gives them so much more presence to have that, though, and it define them. And
Yeah.
I think it's one of the strengths of Stover over Lucino, as you said a minute ago, Antoine, with the whole snapshot of what they are supposed to be in the Lord dump from behind. If it had been Lucino, we'd have had like 3 pages of where they were built, who designed them, what kind of material they were made out of. So it's one of the strengths of him to give us that like little dip into the extraneous material without actually full on diving in for a chapter.
Their design suggested that they were manufactured by Cinar Wraith and exactly
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
would happen.
Which is don't get me wrong, I love that
That's a
stuff.
good
I
example.
love that stuff,
Shit.
but it definitely doesn't lend itself to a high action, high octane plot. It needs to be like a
and
amusing book for that.
It's also good because it's not like this isn't the kind of thing that's necessary for the story at all. But for like fans like us that think about this kind of thing, like Magna Guards can be seen as like an inconsistent threat. But when you establish that they used to have individual skill sets because they were each trained by Grievous in different ways, they're different. They're not like the exact same copy paste droid. So that's why they have different personalities and insights to share. So that's cool.
And
And it
different
would
skill
also
sets too. Why
And
like you were saying
different
before.
levels,
Yeah.
different levels of effectiveness too, because well, it's like
Yeah.
maybe you got one Magna Guard who's totally specialized towards just crowd control against clone troopers, but is shit at dueling.
Well,
And
and
then you
also
had
like
those,
the idea.
then you had those cheap ass ones in the Battlefront 2, which shot missiles out of their pistols. Hated those things.
Well, if the idea is that they're artificial intelligence and they're learning, cybernetic creatures or whatever, it makes sense. If you meet Mace Windu on your first go, then you're done.
Yeah,
but if
true.
you met a Jedi Padawan, you got a little bit better, and then you met a Jedi Knight, you got a little bit better, Master, you got a little better. And oh my God, I'm fighting like Anakin Obi-Wan, I'm giving him trouble. You can consider that being a case rather than saying like, oh, they're just inconsistent. You also can say that
Yeah,
there could be a reason for that.
precisely. It gives that
Yeah.
excuse and that written in explanation for why they're not always the best. Some of them are literally veterans, and some of them are just completely, they've never been trained, let alone they've had an experience against Padawans. They're just thrown into the field brand new. So it fits the lore, which I like, and it makes for an engaging fight when they're discussing them. It gives them some
Right.
flavour.
But before
Well,
that
one of
happens,
the-
we have the fact that one of them has Anakin's lightsaber, and we get a bit of a,
Love
a
it.
redo of yeah.
Mm.
The
And I
whole,
love that it says
get-
he did an incredible enough Kenobi impression that Palpatine had to smother a snort.
Yeah.
Because I can hear the Kenobi, impression that he was doing. Like what's the guy's name? James Taylor is that his name? The guy who does Kenobi
James
on
Arnold Taylor.
Oh, James.
Yeah,
Arnold.
Thank you,
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
I was like picturing him doing that because I feel like he puts on Obi-Wan a little bit, and then like I can hear Anakin doing that, and it was very funny for me, that sequence in the book,
it does happen in the audio drama.
where he actually puts on like the Obi-Wan
Yeah.
impression. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So that's what I was saying. I was just like complaining about Jonathan Davis like yesterday or the other day when we were talking. But he's really good in this audiobook. It's just I think he needs the right project. He shines doing prequel stuff because he does Obi-Wan very well. He does Palpatine pretty well. Those are and like Palpatine, like not Emperor, like he does Palpatine well.
Yeah, because there is a distinction to be
anyway.
made there for sure. Because some people can go too ham on either one, and there's a fine balance between. I think.
I would say
He's
it's
good with
much more-
Windu too.
Yeah, he is. It's much more difficult, in my opinion, to do something like Chancellor Palpatine than the dark side. Well, but anyone can do that. That's like a cartoon character. Actually sounding like Ian McDiarmid playing Palpatine is hard. But
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, back to
Takes us
the
takes
story.
us into the next chapter. Obi-Wan.
Yeah,
and
I mean, the
Anakin
ending of the
2.
chapter is this is how it feels. This is how it feels to be so and so character, but with Anakin saying like, who's Grievous next to Dooku? They can do this, like they've done this before. The impossibility of the situation, but it's and that like you were saying, Evan, that leads into the next like Anakin Obi-Wan thing, saying that what, we are this team and we can accomplish this because we're dope.
And you love this chapter title, right, Antoine? You were talking about it yesterday.
Well, I thought it was weird because it felt like, I mean, even with the new numeral 2, it feels weird because it feels like it's a like a rough draft,
Like a
And, like,
placeholder, yeah.
Like okay, this is just the second chapter with Obi-Wan and Anakin is like the main focus. I'll name it later because everything else has like a pretty proper name except for this chapter, which feels like what? Okay.
I had the exact
Strange.
same thought, and especially considering the content of this chapter. This isn't just
Right.
a nothing chapter. Stuff happens in this, so you'd think it would be the Bond to name, but apparently not.
And even that, I don't even know if it's even appropriate to call it Obi-Wan and Anakin, because it's very Obi-Wan focused. And in particular, it's Obi-Wan focused in his relationship with the Force. So maybe if it was titled something to that effect, you know?
Obi-Wan,
Well, I mean, I guess
and Anakin.
Yeah.
Because I guess Anakin does have his landing thing at the end, so I guess that there's that. But I feel like most of the focus, or at least the thing that popped out to me, was Obi-Wan's relationship with the Force.
Mm-hmm.
And him being everything and everyone and himself.
Easily,
Like,
if you want a description of like how Obi-Wan channels the Force, like just broken down into a single sequence, this is it, pretty much.
I think sometimes it might be a little bit hyperbolic sometimes, but I do think the gist of it is really done well, because that's how a Jedi is supposed to be. Sorry, Connor, go ahead.
The other thing I do like is the fact that is how it relates to the description of how Dooku interacts with the Force. Because when you get right down to it, they interact with the Force in almost the exact same way, but they're going in opposite directions. Kenobi-Wan is just releasing himself into it, whereas Dooku is gathering it unto himself. But it's almost the same process for how you would do it, just turned on its head.
I completely agree with Antoine that he can sometimes be excessively hyperbolic, but I also agree that it works well with these specific characters. Obi-Wan, Anakin, Count Dooku, they all, given their perspectives on the Force and their unique, not applications, but their unique kind of intuitive sense of it and connection to it, and then how that kind of manifests in their general character as well as their actual powers. I think that focusing on that with this kind of over-the-top, not cheesy, but a bit on the nose.
It's never cheesy. I don't think it's ever cheesy.
But it rides that line. It gets close sometimes, and I think that he managed to hold that balance. It just gets on the
point where it's like, oh, you're putting this guy on a pedestal a little bit too much, but then you still get the gist of what he's trying to do.
Precisely,
it's like more poetic than I think it is.
Poetic
like
and
what's actual. Right. Yeah.
Poetic
exactly.
and focused as well. It's making a point.
Right.
It's not just let's do this because we want to big them up. It's trying to explain something about who they are or how they see the Force, which is why it works.
I mean, that last line, like, this is how a great Jedi makes war, and like you were saying, like how all these different characters, approach these situations. It's all how they deal with their situations of fighting. We had Anakin's a little bit with his revelation with Dooku and how taking his pain and using that. Then you see how Obi-Wan does it, with completely letting himself go and just letting the will of the Force take its, take him over, as Jedi are really supposed to be doing. It's great to see that, and I love that the line he makes specifically, "This is how great Jedi makes war," even though that line might seem sort of like in conflict with itself, but it's the perfect way to describe what Obi-Wan's doing in that moment.
Absolutely. And he doesn't use the same kind of techniques to describe the average Jedi. He's talking about these specific characters, and they define them themselves, not just Jedi in general. Even with a line as great as that one, it's attached to who Obi-Wan is. He is the great
Obi-Wan,
Jedi.
But Obi-Wan is Obi-Wan is the great Jedi.
Yeah. It's like, and when you if you think it's written with like a bit of a heavy hand, it is a bit. But I always appreciate that he intricately understands the characters he's dealing with. I mean, there's a whole book about Mace, like one of the most boring characters on film, and it makes like complete sense.
I think I mentioned it before. I might even said it because, again, we totally recorded this yesterday. But I think I said that about Mace, that I would not have ever cared about him if it wasn't for Shatterpoint or for this book, because I understand him way more intimately. And again, the thing I was saying before, empathy. Empathy is a big thing for me. I empathize with what he's going through based on the prose, which we'll get into even more detail because he comes up. But yeah, I totally agree on that point.
It's a strength of the consistency between the characters as well. Stover, like Lucino, I mean, we've said before, the two of them should be the heads of the EU as far as we're concerned, joint together with their strengths and weaknesses, complementing one another. With them knowing so intuitively the characters and the setting, they can keep the consistency between the works. So the big great works that we can discuss and have done and will do, there's this connection between them in terms of who the characters are and what they've done, how they've experienced, how they've grown throughout the stories. So the Mace we see in this book is very much connected to Shatterpoint. He's been through that stuff. It's not just a case of
it's the same author, right?
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah. Right.
But even when it's not, it works. So he's one of the characters where that's happened the most. He's benefited the most from his consistency in the EU.
When I think about Mace and like why I like him, I'm thinking about like this Mace. Like I'm not thinking about like the film at all. Period. Like in the comics, he's pretty decent, but he's sort of like standard. Like he doesn't like really shine. But like here, you read these. If you read these, you can't say that you don't understand like where the character's coming from. I don't think. He does
And
like
there's
such a
times
great
where
job.
it feels like it's his book. Like when there's
Yeah.
his sequence that pop up, I'm like, oh man, like you can tell this guy wrote a book about him, an entire book, you know.
Yeah,
So,
and we'll get to why in a bit because it's not too far off
Deliberate
his sort of
callbacks,
entry into
yeah.
the story. But
Yeah.
for now, we get the approach to Grievous.
They get Grievous's.
who up
yeah,
to this
they're-
point we've skipped over a few bits where he's been dealing with the enemy admiral, the Republic admiral or captain. Was it?
Nida.
Admirable.
Nida.
Admirable.
Yeah, Nida. In fact, as
Apology
Matt says, apology accepted, Captain Nida.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a nice little touch. I like that the discussion they had and how on board I was with the Republic commander. It felt like this was an actual discussion between military, leaders, which I like. He does an excellent job of capturing the core of even the mundane side characters. He manages to understand what they are and what they represent in both the story and the scenes, specifically. Very powerful shift in tone from the kind of flighty, mindful, philosophical Jedi and the hard and battle-disciplined commanders. But yeah, that's what I've seen Grievous up to this point.
Yeah, this is like back when I used to take Grievous like really seriously. It's almost odd thinking about those days because it was like so long ago because he's such a joke to me now. But not to say that he should be that. He's just not portrayed the way I want him to be. But yeah, he's sort of terrifying, but at the same time, he rides like this line for me where it's like cartoonishly over the top bad guy, but it like completely works for me. Like the way that it because of the desperation of the situation he's in. It's like my ship's falling apart and like these people are like backsassing me with like stupid complaints that I don't care about right now. So it's like I'll headshot you with my fist,
that was crazy.
And it's like, and he doesn't just immediately do that. Like he gives the guy an order twice, and he keeps talking. Okay, done with you.
Yep.
It's like I don't have time for this.
And importantly, will then do it himself if someone else won't. Right. He's not doing this for no reason. It's a case of, okay, I need to get this done. Just get out of my way. You're an obstruction now. It's not mindless. Yes, of course, it's over the top because it's Grievous, as you said. It's almost cartoonish in that way, even here. But it's not ridiculous. It makes sense in the situation for a character like that. And I get what you mean.
At the same time, it's the sort of over-the-top behavior that Grievous himself knows he can get away with because he's such an over-the-top figure. He's a brain in a jar in a robot body who is specifically designed to be terrifying. He's specifically designed to be able to punch a guy in the face and just cave his skull in and kill him. Like that's what he's literally built to do.
Yeah, like something that this novel in particular really highlights is his disconnect from, I was not humanity because he's not human, but
living being,
the living,
sentient.
Thank you. Being sentient, and the fact that he almost revels in how much he is disconnected, which is why he acts so differently, and he doesn't care for such mundane things, like his interaction with Gunray, which we'll talk about later in Masters.
Mm-hmm. I think we mentioned before how it's kind of that not disconnect, but he both laments and revels in his disconnect with his past life.
Mm-hmm.
He every now and then he'll be reveling in the idea of yes, look at what I am. I'm this strength and this power and what I've got now. But then another scene he'll be thinking, oh, but I miss the enjoyment
his
of
wife
the flesh
and
it fits the mentality we see written here. Again, that through line for his character is consistent between the books of this trilogy.
Yeah, when you consider in Labyrinth of Evil, when Dooku talks about how his mind had been secretly altered, to make him more monstrous and more disconnected, which really adds layers, to his character and his origin.
Yeah, you can see where the pre-Grievous starts and the post begins, or ends.
Yeah, which I mean, it doesn't make him total not sympathetic because he is still a terrible despot, but it's still it shows you how.
I think you put it well. He's layered, but not sympathetic.
Layered. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
The other thing I find so interesting is how this actually relates to quite a few of the Sith Lords throughout the lore. Like individuals who, as they gave themselves over to the dark side, their bodies either just withered away or had to be amped up with cybernetics to the point where they straight up just practically weren't beings anymore. And they had to do the same thing to just cope with that. They had to learn to revel in their power and to not to think too hard about what they've lost. They got to it's almost like they're promoting their own addiction to the dark side just to stay sane because they are so far removed from their quote unquote humanity.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
a good
Grievous
point,
did try to convert, young Jedi Padawans to become cyborgs like him and the old, Dark Horse Grievous comics. So yeah.
Yep.
I mean, he's the kind of person that if the CIS had just like won the war, like he wouldn't have ever been satisfied. It wouldn't have been like a Dooku situation where it's like, oh, I can rest now. It's like, what does he do without war? Like,
Yeah,
nothing.
he's
Like,
not the Senate type.
Yeah,
Even
to put it mildly.
self-destruct.
even as an
Yeah.
enforcer, he wouldn't be happy. He's not someone like Vader who can focus on that order aspect. He revels in conflict, and he's a warmonger. It's
Yeah,
who
which
he
is part of the point. I mean, even Sidious later laments that Grievous would have need to have been disposed of anyway. So
Yeah.
he
Which
really,
is
he
interesting
really
because he says like I'm looking forward to you meeting my new apprentice. So I always wonder like what was
Yeah,
Sidious's
I had the
plan
same
for
thought. Yeah,
Grievous.
when that came up,
Right.
I was like, oh yeah,
I
he
was-
did say that, didn't he?
I always, yeah, I completely agree with you.
Unless he was
thinking
like,
about
yeah, you're
that.
gonna meet him, he's gonna destroy you. Like it was that kind of a thing.
he will take care of you.
It is
Yeah.
it's completely possible, but I always just took it as like sort of indifference. Like like by the time that becomes relevant for you, I'll be on top of the galaxy.
Yeah,
Who
you'll
cares about you?
You'll either be dead or you'll die soon after. So it doesn't matter.
It's hard to tell where the master planner
make
and the
interesting
troll
when it's
begins with Palpatine sometimes. It's
Right.
like, are you saying, are you
Unless it's
incorporating him into your
trolling.
future plans, or are you just trolling him to his face because why not?
It would be an interesting what if situation if Grievous had somehow survived and was living in the dark times and maybe started his own little rebellion or something, and I don't know, something to think about.
It'd be the sort of thing, he'd be more likely to do that than work as a pawn under the Empire. Under that bastion of order and just stagnation. He wouldn't thrive. So it would fit his
Of
character
course
more.
not, because Sidious had every intention to dispose of him, so he would have had.
Well, yeah, but even if that wasn't the case, I mean, it would make sense for him to break away from that established order and go the rebel route. Even obviously for completely different reasons, but it would make sense.
Yeah. Another origin for the rebels.
Oh God.
Wow, that would have been a different story.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm about to compliment anime here, which I don't do often. So, Callan, get ready for that. So there's a sequence when the fight actually pops off when Obi-Wan and his internal monologue talks about how he can separate Grievous's hold on it because he's mostly a machine and takes off his grip on the lightsaber so he can catch it. That's something obviously you cannot do in a film, and but it's something that anime tries to do all the time by stopping the scene and going I will do this thing and talk about it for the entire episode, and that is the episode. But then, here, reading it in the book, I'm like, oh, that's really clever, Obi-Wan. I wonder how they could have done that. And I'm like, oh, anime.
Yeah, precisely. It has its place. Most of those, again, it's symptomatic of anime overall, but most of that comes from the fact that they're adaptations from manga, where it is literally their thought process is written out. So if they want to stay true, they have to do the same thing on the screen. But I agree, they should definitely adapt that more and make more subtle attempts, which they do sometimes, but it's not very often.
The funny thing is that I personally had the perfect little image in my head for how this would be reflected on film. It would basically just be Grievous raises the lightsaber, goes in the swing, and then you just cut to Obi-Wan's finger, flick, a close-up on the internal mechanisms inside Grievous's hand, and you see just two components, a little spark flare between them, and then you cut to his hand just abruptly springing open, lightsaber falling, Obi-Wan catches it.
That could work.
Basically just
or what was that Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. That was what I was about to
slow
say.
motion thing. Yeah.
Yeah. The problem is that takes
not
away
with
from
the voiceover, obviously, not the voiceover, but I mean
Yeah.
slowing it down.
Just quick little
Ewan
bit where
McGregor's
Obi-Wan
voice just going.
Obi-Wan just does this, zit.
I would enjoy that in a Star Wars film, but I don't think it would work with Obi-Wan. He's go with the flow, so he can't be stopping the battle ahead of time and thinking, okay, how am I going to do this?
He's not thinking in that way.
More,
But
that's more of
Anakin-
that would be more of an Oppo Rensis
Yeah,
thing.
precisely. And Anakin, definitely not, for different reasons. But yeah, it would need to be the right character. But I like that idea, and it could work in Star Wars.
Cut to Anakin's eternal dialogue. Ah!
Yeah, there's a parody to be done there, I think.
I think it's one of those things.
Again, not too many differentiations from film to book. Really, the biggest thing is the fact that there are droidicas in this sequence, whereas in the film there aren't any. That's pretty much it. And of course, we have the Magna Guard hopping at Obi-Wan and shouting, things. that Connor mentioned. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
there's really not much to say about it, really.
It's well written. I mean, I like the jump
Yeah.
between.
It's fun.
The way he describes the electro stuff being thrown at the window. You know, it's that nice
Yes.
flowing description before stop and then simple sentence of he threw it out the window. You know, it's nice to hear the kind of not shock, but the thought processes of the immediacy of this action for the Jedi. That okay, he's doing this then.
I also love how right before he does that, he's like, "Oh, Lord Sidious will forgive me if I kill Palpatine."
Yeah, I was thinking
it's
about
like-
that because like earlier he mentioned to somebody else the Chancellor's not to be harmed. I've been specifically told, and then all of a sudden fuck it.
Yeah.
Like, I
At
gotta
this
go.
point?
Yeah.
And we see that he has been pushed to this point again. We're seeing that it's not just a case of handwave the plot. He is now a desperate being, so it makes sense in the context.
I do like how this is jumping back a little bit, but I like how it ramped up from that point where like it introduced him as like the butcher of worlds and like this like old ass and whatever to God, like things are really not going my way, but like at the same time it's not his fault because he wanted to be gone from here. Like he could have left a long time ago.
He's not being undermined by his threat isn't being undermined at all by his losing because it's always against him. It's the situation completely working against him despite his best efforts.
It's the Krennic effect. It's the Krennic effect for me.
Yeah, precisely. It's not his competence at all. And it makes when it does bring that up, like he's asking about at the time, can we leave? I've got Palpatine. We need to leave now. And also after the fact, when he's lamenting the situation with Sidious, may I be so bold as to question why we didn't do this or that? It's coming up. He's not just taking the blows and rolling with them. He's actually outwardly complaining. To Sidious,
He's actually 3-dimensional.
Yeah, precisely.
And
he's
also,
layered, as you said.
And as much as we're talking about this, it's like in the films, and I know this
He's
is
not
a fact,
3-dimensional.
He's not, but it's also like just the moment is like fairly incomprehensible. Like if anybody who's not like a fan enough of the material to like have read the books or seen the cartoons and they're just watching the movie and they're like actually thinking about it critically, they're going, "What the fuck's going on?" Like I mean, who's this guy and what's going on today, or how did we get here? How did Palpatine wind up there? Like why didn't they leave?
That's what happens when your second movie is not about the Clone Wars, but about the story.
About the end of it with like so many new characters popping in. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The book also offers an explanation on how Grievous could survive in space. I know that's random, but I have seen some people talk about that.
It's worth noting because
that was never an issue for me.
Yeah, as with everything in the films,
most people don't have an issue. I have heard some people talk about like it is explained how he could survive in space here.
It's worth noting because a lot of people, for better or worse, will complain about the science and like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And I understand that to an extent, but Star Wars is definitely one of those franchises where you have to put that on a shelf like a lot more often than you would otherwise because it plays with a lot. Not just because it's the Force in this fantasy style setting, but that obviously plays a factor. It's just the fact that the way it's always been is playing loose with that.
Well, I mean, look at the last movie.
Well, yeah.
I'm not saying that like they have like a free pass to not explain anything ever, but it's really not the most important thing. It is space opera. It is not like science fiction.
Yeah, it's
not
the,
really.
It's
It's not hard
the
science
epitome,
fiction.
if not origin, of sci fantasy. So I can give it a bit more of a pass, but I disagree entirely with people who actively say, as you're not there, that they do get to do whatever they want. They have to maintain certain parameters, and I think that's something he's trying to do here. He's trying to explain why this is a thing
they
that
at
can
least
happen.
maintain internal consistency, even if it doesn't follow actual science.
Yeah, precisely. And
It's enough
important.
to keep you engaged and not break the flow.
Yeah, it's important for any narrative to have that. Otherwise, there are no stakes. You can just say, "Oh, it's fine. They just do this because," and it's not good.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's like when people complain about the Eagles,
yeah, well, that's a legitimate complaint on a narrative level. But yeah,
well,
yeah. But anyway,
we'll not get into that today. But we get the landing sequence.
That's gonna be crazy.
We'll get there one day. Yeah, the Eagles will definitely be a thing we discuss at some point. But the chapter ends. The chapter ends with Anakin being Anakin. I guess this is Anakin Skywalker.
It's the complete opposite. You started the chapter off with the Obi-Wan and how he deals with the Force, and then you have what Anakin does with it, which is the complete opposite. He takes hold of it and he makes it do what he wants it to do because he'll will it because this is what he demands of it. Which
He
of course
pilots
foreshadowing
it.
into what he. Right, he pilots it.
It's more mechanical in its description.
I love
Right.
the idea like this
More
is
like a
this
tool.
just this is
Yeah.
straight up impossible.
Yeah.
But he's
Right,
got
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah,
And not
that
just
to me-
him though.
That's part of it, yeah.
That is one of the biggest missing ingredients of the films for me. I don't care what you say. I will argue this with any four of you. He's not a chosen one for me on film. He doesn't do anything that makes me go, oh yeah, he's like the most important Jedi in existence right now. Period. And like moments like this, they accumulate to, oh yeah, I can kind of see it. This was not conveyed on screen for me anywhere.
Completely agreed. And more importantly than this specific moment and his thoughts behind it, even though that's a point I'll raise later, because his thought process and how it's written in this book is extremely important to the logical consistency of his motivation and his character on that level, regardless of the Chosen One point. But regarding the Chosen One point specifically, the best thing about that as well is the follow-up to this and everyone else's reaction, because this isn't just Anakin pulling a miracle out of his arse. It's Anakin pulling the miracle out of his arse. It's like, oh, okay, so only the Chosen One could have done this, because that is absolutely flat out impossible. He has to be bending all the laws of probability around himself to pull this off on top of his skill.
I think it says a lot that of all people, Mace buys this.
Yeah.
Buys him as
Precisely.
that, by this
That's the
point,
point I'm
because
talking
he can
about.
do things like
He
this.
even he's like, sighs. Of course, it was
Yeah,
Anakin.
of course it's Skywalker. Only Skywalker.
There is even
could do
a
that.
larger discussion to be had about that too, because the prophecy itself doesn't really insinuate power within the quotation of the
No,
chosen
it
one.
doesn't.
Just
Yeah,
that,
like
just
what
that
he
you
will
have
be and
to.
what he will
but
do.
people,
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like people outside the lore kind of put that on there. It's like, well, he's the chosen one, so he's got to be like, oh, powerful and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But
They
you know,
effect.
they
and part of
kind
the
of-
story too tries to do that, like tries to allude to that as well.
Yeah,
but like
they
it's
kind
like,
of
the
roll
actual
it
prophecy
in.
doesn't say that.
They roll it in with that whole Avatar state situation that is so
Right,
heavily a part
right.
of it. And to be fair, that's an integral part of what it means, in terms of the Force and how it manifests around the chosen, family and their descendants. But at the same time, you're right. It's more integrally wrapped into destiny and their and which makes sense for the prophecy. And then their whole presence in the narrative of Star Wars. It's not about what they can do; it's about what happens around them, which I think is established very well here and later on in the Masters chapter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't need a chosen one, period, anyway, like in this story. But if you're going to do it, like at least, especially because like the way that they sort of introduce this concept is Qui-Gon tripping over like, this guy's got 20,000 midichlorians.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
like,
Right.
It's like, all right, well, but okay, so he's a good pilot.
Dot, dot, dot.
That's pretty much it.
Especially when your context is that not even Yoda has that thing, because we know already
Right.
from original trilogy. Oh shoot, Yoda, that's the dude who pulled out the X-wing when he was freaking on his deathbed. You know what I mean?
Which
Like,
is hilarious
you're
about how
thinking
not
power.
impressive a feat that is now.
Yeah,
And I'm
now
like-
it's not because
Yeah,
they've
yeah,
changed like what Jedi can do.
Which I think fits.
I
given it's
prefer
still,
my
it doesn't.
I prefer my old Jedi. I prefer my old.
See, I don't mind. I don't mind that evolution because it fits, still perfectly fits the context of the scene. You know, any great Jedi could have done that, and Luke wasn't a great Jedi at that point, so it fits. But at the same time, yeah, it's from a parody perspective, it's kind of amusing to think that, what, are you serious, Luke? You couldn't do this? Look at that. This is a day, average day for a Jedi.
So that leads us into part 2, seduction.
Yes. Second part of the book
Yes.
with another poem.
Another poem, yes.
The dark is generous and it is patient. I like that opening line.
And I like the ending. Eventually, even stars burned out
Yes.
because it's a callback. It's a callback to Anakin's, fears.
Yeah, not only that, but also it alludes,
The dragon
if not
whispers and all that.
intentionally, it alludes to the idea of Yoda, who frequently refers to his Jedi as stars in the sky. He has that perspective. So I like that it's multifaceted in that level, even if it's not intentional.
Well, it's also like if you divorce like the characters and just like focus on like the Force, like the light has been at the forefront for like 1,000 years now. It's like it's been a long time. It's like this star is burning out. Like it's a period of darkness is coming now.
I think the other thing it reflects is the problem with the Jedi Order is that it's like, even though they kind of accept mortality and death on an individual level, what they want is to have certain concepts or things be eternal. So it's like they think of the Jedi Order itself as a collection of stars that will live on forever and never burn out. Even if the individual stars burn out and new ones are born, will always be there, never thinking that maybe there might be a time when everything is gone. And it's also in their relationship with the Galactic Republic itself, because they attach themselves to a galactic government that at this point has been around for almost 25,000 years. As far as they're concerned, there's always been a Galactic Republic, and there always will be a Galactic Republic. It's been around this long. Why won't it just keep existing? not realizing that
Yeah.
the longer
It's,
something exists, the more likely it is to fall.
Yoda mentions later on that
Yeah, I was
the
gonna say,
Jedi will
well,
live,
yeah,
will live
but,
beyond
but
them.
I do think
But-
I do think though, to Connor's point, Yoda's the only one with that perspective who voices it during this time period. Like when he goes, like when this republic is but dust, like we'll
Yeah.
still be serving the Force.
Precisely,
But
it's about the scale
very
of
much.
their,
But,
of their
but Connor's like
foresight.
absolutely correct in the sense like that's where Mace is coming from. Like
Right,
he thinks that
exactly.
that the Republic's tie to civilization is like that's the galaxy's hope. Like you know, like a separate from us. Like that's what the galaxy needs.
I mean, he actively says it is civilization. You know, that is it.
Yeah.
We don't get a second try or anything. Which
And
is,
I love that because you don't get that
nice
about
for
Mace
him.
at all in the movies. That's one of the things we were
Yeah, I
mentioning.
know,
But you
yeah.
actually get this actual personality trait or like this core value that he has that you don't get.
He's-
any-
The book
inkling of.
in this book literally states that his greatest love is
Right.
the Republic.
Yeah,
Like-
I like how
Because of-
he's always been kind of
like-
one.
Right.
Yeah, he's always been kind of one step away from the rest of the Jedi, not in terms of being departed from them, but he represents that other side, that other facet to them. You know, whereas Yoda is about the Force, is about peace, is about philosophy, which Mace is as well. Don't get me wrong. He also represents that whole law, order, knight type, an archetype, which again
So-
attaches him more to the
Paladin.
role of the
Yoda's the,
Republic.
Totally
yeah,
Paladin.
Yoda's the
I
teacher.
think
Mace
it's
is
also
the
worth-
Yeah, cleric and paladin
Yeah,
kind of
it's
thing.
it's
Yeah.
also worth noting how this also references back to the values of a Corran society, like your loyalty to the tribe, your loyalty to your personal honor, but above all else, you must protect the grassers. They are our livelihood. They are our life. We can't survive in these jungles without them. And it's basically, it's like Windu has just applied that same mentality to the Jedi and the Republic.
Like he has a quote in Shatterpoint where he talks about like how the Sith use darkness that has always been there. They don't create it. So it's like if you're going to like hitch yourself to like a wagon to help you get through that, it's like for like in Corran society it would be the Grassers, these sort of almost quasi spirit guides, if you want to put it that way, is how they view them. But for him, it's like the Republic. It's like maybe the Jedi don't need it, but like beings everywhere, free beings need the Republic to get through the darkness. Like they need that. Separate from the so yeah, I think that Connor's right.
And it's a great segue because, as we know, Mace he knows that he's steeped in the dark, and that's like his main weakness. And I love that it actually represents like he can. It takes one to know one. That kind of expression sort of works because when he sees Anakin walking, when they get back to the planet, he sees it on Anakin. He's like, "Whoa, this kid's like he's a fighter. He's walking like one. He's got this aura of power." It's something I feel like. I mean, other people do recognize it, when they meet Anakin, in prose. But for Mace, I feel like it's something different because he's like, no, like. He's got something else
he's
going
seen
on
what
there.
that could result into, especially when you consider, he's seen blood fever on Harun
Right.
Call and what that can lead him to turn into. When he sees.
Yeah. Mace is often like billed as like stern asshole, Jedi.
Yeah.
Like from the films, I can see why people think that. But like
I mean, he still is though. Like,
Oh,
he
yeah,
legit
yeah,
flips
that's one
off
thing
a
that
guy at
carries
the beginning of
over.
Shatterpoint.
But he has,
But
he
he's
has reasons
relatable.
To be,
Yeah.
he has
Right,
reasons
right.
to be pessimistic. He is not
Right.
just like I'm here to rain on your parade because Mace. Like it's like I
Right.
live life and it's ugly sometimes.
And there's a
you're
whole sequence where he
dangerous.
talks about,
The
sorry, not he,
jungle.
but Stover talks about him wanting to try and smile again, because
Yeah.
he hasn't done it in a decade. And, it's not like he's, like you were saying, he's not just, I'm badass to be badass, but he's trying to, like, be a kind of cool guy again at some point or have the love in his heart again. But it's hard, when you're
Because
going
he's
through all
lost
This-
so much and been through so much conflict. Yeah.
This is a
Sorry, go
man
ahead, Colin.
who upon whose shoulders weighs the entirety of, as he sees it, civilization. This is a man
Right.
who is going to be, even with all of his Jedi philosophy, even with all of his Jedi nature, he's going to be struggling with this. And I like that we see the kind of cracks, not particularly here because this is more of a musing on Anakin himself, but later on in this sequence, in this set of chapters, Masters particularly, we start to see the cracks in who he is. In fact, we do see it right here because he's talking to Obi-Wan about it. He's not falling, but by any stretch of the imagination. But you can see how if he was anyone else, he would be.
The wariness is affecting him.
Yeah, him and Yoda
the
both.
uncertainty in the future. I mean, he even discusses at the beginning of this chapter how one of his primary gifts to see shatter points has been inhibited by the darkness that's been clouding the Force, and that's very distressing to him, especially when I mean, the book doesn't say this, but when you consider, what that gift means to him, and how rare it is, within the Order, it such a prospect is, yeah, it's serious.
Yeah,
you get that sense of like just the immense frustration he's going through with like, I can tell that there's something going on here, but I can't see it. Like I can't really like in that feeling of like knowing like impending like doom and feeling helpless about it. It's got to be like, fuck.
Yeah,
it's like it's like what do I do?
Precise. It's the ultimate frustration, but not only that, it's the fact that no one else can see it. They have the vague illusions, and obviously the fact that he's told them, but
they can't see the fault lines.
Yeah, him intrinsically knowing that something is going to destroy them from this direction, and not being able to do anything about it or help anyone else do something about it is must be the most impossible. Vexation.
Somebody like Kenobi would be like, well, I have my feelings about this, or I suspect this, or I think this. Like Mace knows when he's right. Like even if he's like not, like he believes he's right. So it's like that kind of personality. He has a hard time with this. Like he's in a really hard spot, and I completely get it.
And again,
which is what he's doing when they're
love
approaching
of the Republic and civilization. It's that weight. It's not just I'm personally going to lose something. It's everyone is going to lose if we don't solve this unknown problem that I can see and no one else can for some reason. It's and it's just the ultimate problem for him. It's the closest approximation you can get to that sense of destined dread when you do see something in any narrative or any story, and like when you solve a mystery ahead of the time, and realize something's going to happen, it definitely taints the progression of the plot for you, because you're like, oh, I guess this is, maybe you're not certain, but depending on the how it's written, you could be pretty much certain that something's going to happen, and it's like, okay, everything else loses its kind of flavor and loses its you understand why Mace isn't smiling anymore. It's there's nothing to smile about. Why can't anyone see that? Why are you smiling? That's right there in front of us, and we can't do anything about it. What's there to smile about? And I like that, as Antoine said, I like that we get his attempts to try, and actually sort of succeed almost in this moment. This is the first time he's had any sort of hope.
And I think like it's nice seeing that ray of hope, and on the back of like it being like presented on a platter from Anakin of all people is odd, but it's cool. But I really like the way that he illustrated it with look at this planet. Like how safe do we look? It's like we've given up all these things in the name of this guy. He's going to take care of us. Like he's going to get us through this. Like this chancellor. Look at this planet. Look at Coruscant. And I think that that's something that the film doesn't spend any time with at all. And it could have been like a really great way of showing the impact of the war. Like even if you're not going to have like a whole Clone Wars movie, at least have something like that where people are like, where the audience can see through the characters' eyes what this war means to them. Because you really don't have that, and it's a missed opportunity.
Goes back to the very beginning of the book when you see the citizens' reaction to Palpatine's, being captured. I mean, that little sequence right there says it all.
Even the previous book of the trilogy
would have helped if we had it in the movie.
Even the previous book of the trilogy, with the political changes and the idea of all of the propaganda that's being displayed on advertisement and stuff. Everything. This is not simply the war. It's the way the Senate is currently acting for the machinations of Palpatine. It's everything.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give Clone Wars credit for trying during some episodes, when they showcase propaganda and stuff like that, but they never really hit the ball for me, at least personally. But yeah.
And going back to Mace for a moment, I also like that he's paying attention to everything. You know, this isn't just finally I'm realizing this about Anakin. This is something that wasn't true of Anakin until today. You know, his presence, his confidence, his aura in the Force has changed. He doesn't know why, and he doesn't how, but he can see it. You know, he's paying attention to these things, not just Anakin, but
and he also understands
Palpatine
the importance of Palpatine and Obi-Wan, and knowing that this trio here are about to set some stuff off. And
this is the fulcrum on which the entire galaxy is destined.
And he knows, there's something wrong here. I know I can trust Obi-Wan, so I know that he's probably the better end of this. I need to side with him.
Probably.
He's placing those bets.
Because they already know. Because they already, from Labyrinth, which none of that is actually in the movie, but is that they're on the heels of finding out, who the Sidious is, and that they know, yes, he is part of the Senate in some capacity, and they're like, okay, well, we don't think Palpatine is. I think he even says he's out of it.
He says the only he says.
Control,
he says the only reason he's not a suspect is because he already controls the galaxy, which is kind of.
I love that point.
Yeah.
That's another one of those Lucino Stover explanations, and I love that. it's like, that makes sense.
That would be a deterrent from people criticizing the film if like a line like that had been said on screen. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, the Jedi are doing their jobs. Like it's like Palpatine is supposed to be a master manipulator. I get it, but on film it seems like he really didn't have to do anything. Like he just
everybody was just being idiots around him.
Yeah, you don't want that to be the case. And I also like what Antoine mentioned, where he sees the connection between that trio. I love like the line from KOTOR where Jolie Binder's like, old Jedi get excited. They go, ooh, force, swirling force. And we go, ooh, destiny. It's like that's kind of what's going on here. And he's not wrong, but like he doesn't really know what's going on.
I love Bindo's ability to state the obvious and kind of poke fun at the Jedi without being even remotely kind of wrong or insulting. It's just kind of it's his perspective on a reality and just kind of. He doesn't take himself too seriously. I love that. But yeah, the moment again, the fact that he's hedging his bets and placing on Obi-Wan, and just understanding that of these three, Obi-Wan's the best bet for the galaxy. I mean, you don't even need the Force to see that.
I also find it interesting when he finds out about Dooku's death, and he's like, for a moment, he's completely like it's one of the few moments like we ever see Windu like, quote unquote, slack-jawed, and it's
impressed, and also I think that helps too for Dooku's case too, because sometimes Dooku can get the short, or movie Dooku can get the short end of the stick, but in the EU he's something to deal with, and it's good to have that moment to being like, yeah, you took out someone crazy, so like this thing I felt from you already when you stepped off the platform is kind of validated by you saying that you just accomplished this thing.
It is that validation, not just for Anakin, but Dooku as well. It makes sense that if Mace Windu of all people is giving such high credit to Anakin for defeating him, then what does that say about the character? It kind of justifies and validates everything that we've seen up to this point. Even if you don't know anything about the rest of the lore, from what we've read in this book, Dooku was a big fish, and Mace is now recognizing that.
Well, he literally says, Dooku was to the CIS what Palpatine is to the Republic, which pretty much is. So, and he understands the impact of that. And he also does try to kind of grill Anakin, like, how did you defeat him?
Yeah.
And we get that kind
Anakin, how did you do it?
Yeah, that's in sort of like how it doesn't really, like, Anakin doesn't really, he squirms out of saying these things because
Palpatine
dark side. And I love that bit where he's like, he was like less than happy, to like to hear like, Palpatine speak for a young Jedi who seemed, like unwilling to speak for himself, because that is like stern Jedi in a way that, that makes sense. That I get like why he's pissed about this. That's not just, again, Mace is not an asshole for asshole's sake. It's like he's like, I'm an instructor, I'm a leader, and this is not the way somebody who wants to be on the council should conduct themselves. Like, I need to see more. Like, he's done this crazy thing. He's taken out Dooku, but what is this misgiving he has now? That's got to be alarming. If you're paying attention. Which he is,
especially
as you said, Kelly.
Coming from someone like Skywalker, who, as we'll get to in a minute, is a huge threat. They recognize that there's truth to the suspicions of Anakin that the council fear him. It's not for the reasons and not for the motivations that he thinks, but it makes sense that they should fear him, and they need to be wary of this chosen one, and this figure of, as they've said actively in the prose, unstable power. He is not the quintessential Jedi that Obi-Wan is, for example, which is why they always use him to kind of toe the line.
Yeah, which after that sequence leads us into them pairing off, and Anakin going to mingle with the politicians, being the poster boy. Oh, sorry, poster man.
Right.
of the hour. Love that correction.
And Mace speaking on matters.
Right. About how keeping a secret from Anakin and him. It's kind of, we see Obi-Wan's uneasiness.
It's the first kind of creeping in. It's first kind of creeping in of these suspicions that we'll get from the council, the kind of this mired sense of conspiracy that's now going to be one of the focuses of the book for the council between them and the Senate. This is Obi-Wan kind of being introduced to that properly. I think it works well.
Beginning of the political game.
Yeah, because he's one of those people that won't be mired by that. He'll go, okay, something's clearly wrong, but he's not like, oh, is the council up to something? He has implicit trust in the Order, in Yoda, and the council. Whereas the other one would be like, this is setting off alarm bells, and I like that because he's not wrong.
But the thing, he also trusts, how much he trusts Anakin, and that conflict lead, sorry.
Yeah, precisely. It's that interesting point where he trusts both sides of this struggle, not counting Palpatine, of course, Anakin and the council specifically, and he's in the middle of it. He has those kind of conflicting twin duties to his friend and his people. I like that. It's really powerful.
Yeah, Obi-Wan will do his duty. Yeah.
The funny thing is that this just kind of makes me realize that Obi-Wan and Anakin, for this matter, have both really had it easy. We discussed this in the last part about how being involved in the war itself means that they're far away from Coruscant, out on the front lines, leading battles where things are clear cut. It's like, I got my soldiers right here, the enemy's over there, shoot. Like, they haven't had to deal with the shades of gray political maneuvering that's been going on Coruscant. They haven't had to deal with politicking with Palpatine, and now they're both brought back into this situation. And it's interesting in that I would consider both of them to be in over their heads almost immediately, but Obi-Wan actually starts trying to adapt his situation, adapt his approach and get in tune with the situation, whereas Anakin is basically just starts spiraling out of control, more or less.
I mean, Mace
well, I mean,
says it.
Obi-Wan can play politics.
Oh yeah, that's what you see a lot in this.
Yeah.
But
Just
Yeah.
what backs up Connor's point there is that Obi-Wan is a Jedi, like, because like he's very like Mace, what are you talking about? Like, move against Palpatine? Like, why would we ever do that? Like, that's crazy. Within like a couple chapters, he sees a bit like what Mace is talking about when they bring forward that legislation later on that they discuss in Masters. He's like, yeah, Palpatine's shady as fuck. You know, I mean, it's like, this is like Obi-Wan. Like, it's like, yeah, he went from like sort of straddling the fence to I'm on this side now. You know, so he does adapt. Yeah,
and you know, Mace himself says you haven't been here. You know, you haven't seen what's been happening. You've been out on the rim fighting the good fight. You know, this is the introduction of the situation to Obi-Wan. He's deliberately briefing him on the situation because he knows he can trust him, and he knows he's so integrally tied to the situation. You know, on the whole destined level, as we discussed. I like that Obi-Wan even here is kind of winding Mace down a bit and pulling him back from the edge. It's like, remember, we don't. You know, there was a Jedi once that told me we don't have to win, we just have to fight. And Mace is kind of, he takes that breath and like, yes, thank you, you're right, perspective.
Shatterpoint reference.
He's not losing his way, Mace, but he's stumbling, understandably.
It's easy,
and Obi-Wan's easy to bring back from the edge.
And that's like kind of what Obi-Wan does so well, is like, that's like Obi-Wan is like sort of like a light to other people, like to guide them back. But it is a bit of a platitude though, because like what Mace, I think Mace, like, it gives in and he totally gets like what Obi-Wan's trying to do, and like that's sort of like it ends in Obi-Wan's favor, but really that is sort of like a band-aid. Like, that's not an end game strategy, you know what I mean? Like, that helps you get through the moment, but like Mace is seeing things come down to like doomsday now. Like, those are nice words, but not really. Not now.
It's about that kind of mentality completely heals his emotional state and his mental state, but it's not. The problem is that will be a continuous battle for him. That's why the line is so perfect. You know, we don't have to win, we just have to fight. That will get him through the emotional, mental situation. But then he now has to solve the physical one. He has to focus, as Obi-Wan is trying to make him focus on the actual problem.
I think he would love for Obi-Wan to be right. But he just knows like that's not quite. Things aren't that simple anymore.
They need to get out of their own heads and kind of focus on the problem as much as they can. And it's the fact that he's been here to face this weight all this time. That's this. You know, Obi-Wan would be having the same problem if Obi-Wan had been here, not to the same extent, because Obi-Wan, as you said, he is that kind of beacon of light and hope and that bastion and that pillar of the Jedi and who they are. He doesn't have his own. He doesn't bring as much of his own baggage to the whole Jedi thing, whereas everyone else kind of flavors it their own way. That's why he's so pure and brilliant. But he would still be close to the situation himself. He just hasn't been here. And as you said, we get to see it later on in these chapters.
Right, and that's like where you get that conflict between him and the council, where like he doesn't understand, how is this so easy for you to ask me to do this? It's like, but they're like, just do it, like, because they're hardened, like they've been, like they've had to be to get to this point.
As is Palpatine's entire plan. This is the point. It was supposed to be to degrade the Jedi and grind them down and make them something they weren't supposed to be.
We can talk about that more later when it actually comes up, but I'll just say in short, like, I do like that the book gives the Jedi a perspective. It's like if you watch the movies, you can just come off like, well, I'll just side with Anakin because like the council's being all douches to him and like they're like making him turn on his friend. It's like, yeah, but no, because like they have a reason for this. Like they're being forced to play this dirty game. It's not like they're just as devious as the Sith because they are. Like that's not the way. They've been dragged down into this to be connecting.
And they're still desperately trying to do the right thing. This isn't the case of that. They haven't become corrupted. They've been corrupted in so much that they're having to dirty their hands with the politics and the hard choices. But they're not in any way at their cause turning at all, which I love. It's getting them to give off that impression without actually falling is very difficult, and he does a really good job of that here.
So do we kind of bounce into like the Padme?
Yeah, let's just go over that real quick, please.
Please.
Yeah, so this is about as satisfying as every scene with those two.
Well, the funny
do
thing
we want to
is
go
that
beat by beat through this?
This is
go ahead.
Padme
No.
Amidala.
Let's
the funny thing is though is that reading through these bits where it's both Anakin and Padme's internal monologues about each other, the funny thing is that I find it to be so overwritten that it enters into the realm of self-parody, and that makes it entertaining to read. So even though the scenes themselves are horrible, at least he's basically turning this into, okay, guys, I agree with you. These scenes are crap, so I'm just going to make fun of them for you.
Yeah,
This
it really does.
Anakin, oh my Anakin, I can't believe
Beth
home.
in space. Yeah.
But I mean, just the fact that I'm going to rattle off her list of amazing accomplishments. She's been the youngest queen. She's seen battle. She's a great leader. But at her core, she is Anakin Skywalker's wife. Like that's like my life has no meaning without being his wife. But it's the way he says that's ridiculous.
It's the way he's saying it's saying neither more nor less than saying I am alive because I'm Anakin's wife. It's like what?
What?
I mean, she's
What kills it for me
gently to her hand.
A
vine tiger purring.
That's what kills it for me.
Every softness of
she
his
views
touch,
her husband.
Every kind glance or loving word is a small miracle in itself. How can she not be pregnant?
Now, the thing that hurts about that the most is that in literature, that actually has been a trope. Particularly, it was in Of Mice and Men, where there's a character in that book named Curly's wife.
Yep.
Curly's wife. She's never called Susan, Mary.
It's
you know,
true.
but that was intended by Steinbeck, I believe, was the author's name.
It
Right?
was
Steinbeck. Yeah. He does it intentionally because that was her role in that story, is that she did not have her own personality because she was so tied to her husband. To do that to the mother of Leia, who is like probably undisputedly the most badass woman of the 1970s, 80s action
total
fantasy.
disservice.
Well,
This is supposed to be her mother.
Like, Leia came from this.
Well, no, she didn't. She came from Bail Organa, which is why.
For people like in the comments, I just would say I think somebody that'll give her really stiff competition would be Aliens' Ripley, but otherwise, she is a badass.
You're right. You're totally right. Yeah.
Different flavor though as well. It's kind of both sides of the perspective, isn't it? They're unique in their own way. So I like how they're reflections of different scale senses of power for me.
Right. It's bad enough that she just lost her identity, totally. And even in the movie, like you were saying, self-parody. Yeah, because this is kind of what she is.
She does nothing of importance in Revenge of the Sith. Like she's
except
just
she dies,
or she's used as a plot device for Anakin. Yeah,
Natalie Portman.
Incubation.
Natalie Portman's amazing.
Yeah.
She said in an interview that she has never showed her kids any Star Wars movie, none of them, not even the original trilogy.
Because then they'll ask about.
And the sad thing is, is that I can't blame her in the slightest. I cannot question that decision. She, of all people, has every right to do that because
she's not the greatest.
Black Swan before she would have them watch the prequels.
Yeah,
I don't know if you guys have seen Black Swan, but that one's pretty.
It's a bit crazy.
Crazy. Yeah.
She's not a great actress, by any stretch of the imagination, but she is solidly good,
great.
and the films do not show that.
No, here's the thing. She's good when she's directed. There's some actors who need to be directed, and she's really good when she has a really good director behind her. But when she doesn't, she's not very good in the same way that Ewan McGregor can take a character and just
do whatever
have the natural
wants.
talent to do it. She needs someone to kind of have a guiding hand for her. She's very good when she has that.
Yeah, when she has
and
that
the problem
framework.
is that George Lucas is incapable of providing that. Yeah, the problem is that George Lucas is incapable of providing that to anyone.
He is not an actor's director.
He just got really lucky with casting it very well because the original trilogy, and also he didn't direct 2/3 of it. So.
Yeah, he didn't direct 2/3 of it, and the first one is notorious for a lot of it being saved in the editing. So yeah.
It's like his only direction was faster, more intense. And the sad thing is I wish he had applied that direction to more of the prequel trilogy because that probably would have helped.
You're not kidding.
Even so even that
more
Yay!
politics.
their relationship itself is really terrible, and there's like all these illusions of like abuse when
Yeah.
he's like holding on, which is fine because they are alluding to later on where he chokes her, so
Yeah.
She's not.
hints of
She's
it.
not like worried about it though. She's not.
yeah,
like,
exactly.
She doesn't.
grabbing
she
her
doesn't
on the
have
shoulders and yeah.
The action is great that it's there, like that should be there because you should foreshadow that, but for her just to be like okay with it, like she's kind of like complacent to his weird possessiveness,
I'm
you know.
not
And,
about
and
that.
even
Like,
episode
more
2, I mean,
ridiculous.
to be fair,
becomes a
it is
lot more-
consistent because Sand People when he came out and said he killed
To be
like a
angry is
freaking
to be human.
Yeah.
What's
still
crazy
was
about
kinda
that,
crazy.
Antoine, is like if you listen to the audio drama for that sequence, her tone doesn't change at all. She
Yeah,
keeps
that's
the
true.
same calm tone while this is happening, and it adds a whole new layer of unpleasantness to this
Well,
to that sequence.
It's the fact that she's,
Yeah, in that context.
outside of her connection to
Yeah.
Anakin, she is, like Leia in terms of her badassery. She has an esteemed record, and she has, seen, like you said before, seen action. She's been a senator. She's been a queen. This, she has those traits about her. But the problem is they just get completely thrown out the window whenever Anakin steps into the field. So, and this is just laughable to the point, her entire life is being his wife. It's crazy.
Yeah, but in the
It's crazy.
context of what
It's like
Evan
a-
just said, like when you said the tone doesn't change, like that implies like that this is the norm. You know, they like this is just like the way that
That's
they
right.
are.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. That's why it's so
Um,
disturbing. Which
Right.
yeah,
And this
horrible.
is like you'll never hear me say. Well, you'll very rarely hear me say like the Clone Wars show did things better, but like I like those episodes where like
that
he-
arc that she had with Corvus or
Clovis,
whatever that guy's
Clovis,
name.
yeah.
Clovis,
Something like
that's
that,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, pretty good.
And he like had like a tantrum, and she was pissed off about it because like you're out of control. So I mean, yeah, like that
is
she's a
easily
human,
the most
yeah.
characterization she ever got ever.
In relation
in
to
anything.
Anakin, certainly, yeah.
Or I would say period.
She's got that, so this is how liberty dies, to thunderous applause. She has that kind of political disgust, I guess, there for some reason. That's the one time we actually see it in the story. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. She's very bland otherwise.
Well, and also it
overall,
didn't help that they cut out all the even the deleted scenes. She had to be kind of like coerced into like joining that. You know what I mean? It wasn't even her like that was like leading it at first. So
But it
which
was
is something
like we
that
said in
happened.
the
I think
previous
that
book.
story came out. Well, that story came out. Remember about the different ending with Padme, where she was
Yeah,
actively
right.
going to try and stop Anakin. So, like,
Yeah.
so like her agency was actually taken away in like the final draft.
Yeah, and even in the previous book, she had that kind of connection to Palpatine, where she trusted him a lot more than the others. The alarm bells weren't going off in her head the same way it was for Mon Mothma and for Bail.
Because
So
the
I would
problem
read
is
Leia's
that she
mom
was in a
and see it in the Republic.
yeah. It's also just down to the problem of she's had too many personal good experiences with Palpatine, and she hasn't been as exposed to his shadier side, because the problem is that most of Palpatine's shady activities beforehand were when Amidala was Queen of Naboo and therefore wasn't seeing what he was doing. And the problem is that after she arrived and started serving as senator, she was just senator. She didn't see what the hell he was up to as chancellor. She always had a bit of a remove and never realized what sort of person she was actually dealing with. And to her credit, she did figure it out towards the end, but the problem is that by then it was just too late to matter.
Right. I mean, she claims to be one of his biggest vocal protesters, but you rarely really get a flavor of that.
It's always on the constitutional political level. It's
Right.
about objections to the amendments, objections to the focusing of power into one point. It's not about his character, his personality. And in her defense, her perspective and experience of him up to a point was just the fact that this was the man who got results. This is the man who helped save my planet, my home. So
their planet.
Yeah, their planet, precisely.
Yeah,
Good point. So it's the fact that they've got that shared heritage in her mind. They've got that shared connection, and he cares supposedly about what he's doing. So yes, obviously that should have been dropped much sooner than it was in her mind. But at least the lead-in makes sense from her view.
And one thing I do find so interesting is that when you actually look at a lot of their interactions throughout the expanded universe, the second Amidala's in the room, Palpatine immediately goes into kindly old grandfather mode. It's like, oh, hello there, Padme.
Yeah.
I mean, it is also mentioned, later in the book when the delegation of the 2000 meets with him, that like he's always talking directly to her and pretty much ignoring the other senators, which means you could maybe interject that he might have a burgeoning respect and or understanding of her political skills. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Well, worth noting as well, because we have been ragging on her in her relation to Anakin specifically, Stover does a good job of at least highlighting that her respect for duty and respect for the responsibilities both of them face are very much present in her mind. And she is making a point to Anakin, saying, "You listen to me." The one time she does get frustrated with him is when he kind of brushes aside her talk about the Order. You know, your presence in this story, in this grand narrative of the galaxy, is important. We can't just throw that away for us. You know, she has that sense. Granted, the actions then immediately, you know, ignore that, but we can see that she's at least aware of the situation, both with her and him. She understands that there are things more important than these two, where Anakin doesn't. Anakin is just completely mental. Like, he would burn the galaxy to the ground if it saved her a day of pain. Well,
I mean, even she points out, you know, she's like, you know, she was older than him and seen more. It's like, 10 years.
Yeah, really creepy.
that's another thing. And has a more complete grasp of the entirety of the situation. So that does kind of carry through it.
Was
like,
it 10 years? I thought it was 5.
No, he was 9 and she was 19, and
I thought she was 14.
No.
She was 14, wasn't she?
9/14. Because the only reason I know that is because of the album.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, the problem was she was always playing herself younger than she was as an actress. Like, so she seems much older than 14 because she.
No,
like,
what's the guy? The Weird Al.
Weird Al
Song. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Like, he's 9 and she's 14, but he's gonna marry her
exactly,
someday. Yeah.
That's probably why I've got it in the back of my head.
Less creepy.
Yeah, but still,
The other
more
thing
than
I
valid
do
point.
the other thing I do think is worth mentioning, where Anakin is concerned, the other problem with the interactions between Padme and Anakin and her attempts to get through to him is Anakin's problem is that he does desire power, but he only desires it insofar as fulfilling his own personal desires. You know, someday I'll stop people from dying. The problem is that he has no concern about the responsibility that comes with that power and is perfectly content following orders. If anything, being the enforcer rather than the leader is what he truly wants. He just wants to be given a mission and then hit boots on the ground, do it.
Even then, when they have that conversation, and he's like, she says, like, "Oh, who's going to do that? Who's going to change it? You?" And he's like, "No, not me." You know, like, someone.
Benign dictator, and I'll just do whatever he says. Yeah.
To his credit, he was never
sense
intending to be
me,
Grand Master of the Order or anything. He wasn't seeking power in that sense. You're right. It was only personal, physical power, not the political. That he was led by.
There's a dissonance, though, eventually, where he starts going on about, like, his empire. Like, he's like, when did that happen?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't see that part.
Right, that's weird, too.
That's just full-on dark side madness.
Yeah,
it's
he's
like
gone
at that
off the
point.
deep end at that point.
That's one of the things the book doesn't really justify.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it would be hard to be fair. I can't think of an easy way.
That line there, it's hard.
I won't blame the book.
It's one of those fixed points
of
of
the story. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to Masters.
Yes, please. Let's skip this.
I think people understand how we feel.
Yeah, we've discussed that enough. Angie's pregnant, of course. Is the revelation of that.
Sorry, that's the big plot point. She's pregnant. Yeah.
I think that I think it is worth. Sorry.
Sorry. It's what lends the immediacy to the situation, though. This is what amps up the emotional aspect. Right. It has to be. He does a good job, at the very least, in this chapter of highlighting Anakin's shift in perspective. It's not just about him and Anakin, him and her now. He now has a more quote-unquote selfishness attached to this relationship in regards to loving the children and protecting their future. So worth mentioning that before we move on.
It is a little hammy when he's like, I can sense it. There's someone's coming between us. And Padme's like,
oh God.
Yeah.
Who is it? Who's between us? Even when he gets angry, it's like, oh, come on, man.
I wanted to say real quick, though, the thing that I found entertaining, even though like out of character, was C-3PO in that chapter early in that bit. Like,
officially, she's
busy, but unofficially, she's a slut, and she's waiting for you in the hallway.
I forgot about that line. Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, like, what? C-3PO? Who
discussion in the afternoon and possibly through the night. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh God, yeah, the C-3PO in that moment.
I mean, that is kind of the relationship. They only see each other for weeks at a time, and that's probably all they do when they see each other. Like they are like newlyweds, in a sense.
Yeah, that's
They
true.
don't
They
have
are
a real
still
relationship.
technically, yeah.
Yeah.
Very true. But yeah, then we get to Masters. So now I've covered that beat.
Which is okay. Sorry, I know we said we're gonna leave, but it's kind of like the same thing that with the Romeo and Juliet. People are always like, "Oh, what a great romance!" But if you really think about it, if they survived, those guys would have been like divorced or broken up. You know, soon after.
Without question.
Sorry. All right, done. Masters. The draft resolution that they know that Palpatine's trying to put through, but he's trying to say that senators are doing
we
it.
have Obi-Wan, Mace, and Yoda in Yoda's private chamber.
Great
I like
scene.
this is a very long chapter, and I like the different meanings for like masters, like like that play out throughout it. But this is like a good way to introduce that, where it's just like these three people that each have a different, like not a completely separate perspective, but just a different take on the same issue.
Right.
And it's I love how it's a very like delicate like line to walk, where Mace is pretty much right about every single thing he says, but he can't actually know that. Like in universe, you can't know you're right about that. So Yoda has like a lot of legitimacy with him being like, yeah, but we don't know enough. Even though Mace turns out to be correct about all this, it's only like in hindsight, And I really appreciate how well he was able to give legitimacy to both sides of this argument. That's hard to do.
Yeah, everyone here, even though they are coming from slightly skewed different perspectives, is right, in their own way. Yoda isn't being, too restrained by saying let's not forge ahead. He's being absolutely correct because he's got the, responsibilities of the Order on his back. Mace has got responsibilities of the entirety of civilization on his back. So he's like, yeah, we have to do this no matter what. No matter what it does to the Order, we have to do this now. Obi-Wan's like, again, as we said before, he's only just got into the situation, so he's still a bit more reserved and
Figuring out where he lands.
It's kind of like, okay,
kind of
being in the room.
He's being the in-between man.
Yeah,
basically.
he's being the negotiator, and this is actually the first time we get
it's called out.
Yeah, it's the first time we get like not an insult, but the two go, "Oh yeah, here comes the negotiator again to mediate the situation." It's like you haven't been here, Obi-Wan.
Let us bicker. This is what we do on a daily.
Yeah,
man.
precisely.
Two old dudes arguing, and
there's no kind of mean-spirited nature to it, but you can tell that this is actual frustration. Like, Obi-Wan, can we not right now? There is.
Yes.
But by that same token, he does find a compromise.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
They respect his wisdom and showcase it.
Well, that's the thing. We don't see this a lot. We don't see like the Jedi Council, even just small portions of them, like in this
have a conversation.
Talk or debate. Like in the movies, it'll just Yoda, go to Kashyyyk, whatever.
The problem is that the Jedi Council, as presented in the films, is basically an echo chamber where they're all in perfect agreement, whereas the book actually makes clear, no, each counselor has his own point of view and his own take on the situation and what should be done, and because of that, they're having trouble. They're having trouble making decisions.
Oh, so it's a council now? It's not just the two of you?
Right.
I knew you were going to say that. I was waiting for that.
But also
movies, they are used as a means to say who's going where in the plot. That's what they're used for on film. Like here, like they're discussing issues. Like they. What were you going to say, Colin?
Sorry,
it's funny because this is the same thing with the scene too. Because at the end of the scene, it's Yoda and I will remain on Coruscant. They talk about plot stuff, but it's the lead up that you need for that. You know what I mean?
That's the stuff I would love to see on screen. Like this kind of, just the fact that Yoda is like Yoda, but like his second in command, like he's willing. He doesn't like go, oh, bow down to Yoda. Like there's insights that I have, and I disagree with you, Yoda, about this. But it's like, and it's respectful. But I mean, it's like I just like the fact that Yoda is not just the Order follows me blindly. I like that I'll have thoughts here.
And Obi-Wan as well. He is nothing compared to these two in terms of a political power within the Order at the moment, outside of the fact that he is, because he's a council member and he's Obi-Wan. He's been there for a fraction of the time. Especially compared to Yoda. Yoda is just one of those. He's just a baby to Yoda. Mace is to an extent, I guess, the same way.
Yeah,
but he's had more. He's had more time to develop under that whole "I'm also a master of the Order" level because he's been there for many more years on the council. Yeah. But what I like most about the scene, I was about to say a second ago, is that this particular instance, we get debates and council discussions elsewhere in the lore. They're few and far between, but they exist. What we don't always get is such an emotive discussion.
Micro series, one of the best.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's always
tension. Tension is the key word here in this scene.
It's always the kind of philosophy. I could sit and watch a council debate for hours. Seriously, I genuinely could. Give me a Game of Thrones style political situation with the council. I'd be done. But I'd be set. But this is an emotive discussion. Drama. Yeah, precisely. This is an emotive, emotional, not heated, as heated as a Jedi discussion can be, right? It's not it's not just this lofty debate. They have stakes in this. They each have different perspectives. They're getting frustrated with one another. and it plays so well because they are Yoda, Mace, and Obi-Wan. You couldn't choose 3 more different Jedi in terms of their personalities and perspective on the Force and the Order as a whole. It's the perfect blend.
I think you could, but anyway, I get the point.
Well, I mean, in this, while also having that measured balance between them, you could go for someone like Anya Kuro, for example, who would be completely devoid and separate and set aside. But these 3 can play off each other. Probably they can go tit for tat without imbalancing the equation and turning the others against the rest of them in some way. It's they each bring their own measured side.
But like you said, there's a respect.
Yeah.
There's a respect to it, yeah. I like that you have like the 2 sort of comparative like young bucks, like they're focused on like sort of the short term, you know what I mean? But it's not wrong though. But like Yoda's like, well, like there's like this bigger picture, but he's not like what he says they have counters for, or Mace does, where he's like, like if we act in haste, they'll get the advantage. They already have that, it's like, and it's like, if we wait, it's to give them the advantage. Like, well, they already have that, Yoda says, but it's like,
or if we go without proof, then that can destroy our order. He's like, well, our order will be destroyed if we do nothing,
right?
Like, all that stuff's coming
like,
up.
It's like Mace is like, well, make a decision, It's like, so I mean, it's like they're both right, and it's very hard to do that kind of thing. If I was told I had to write this conversation, I'd be pulling my hair out. Like, what do I do? But it just feels so natural too. It feels like he didn't think too much about how to do this. It just comes to him.
Yeah,
it plays like an actual conversation.
He puts the character. It definitely plays like a scene that's been Discovery written, where he just placed the characters in the scene, and what happens. He's not kind of planned it out like you said in terms of a scheming way. But also the fact that the point of they could be playing into the Sith's hand comes up. This could be the Sith plan to turn the Jedi against the Senate and vice versa, and then make them destroy each other. So they can't. Yoda's right on that level to not act in haste as well. They're all making so many different multifaceted points, and then Obi-Wan steps in when they get to the heated discussion. He gets the okay, guys, can we take a chill pill? And they just give him that look like, really, Obi-Wan, really?
Yeah. Because like the one thing that I think that Mace is like firmly right on is because Yoda, in a way, like this is like his criticism of himself later, is that like he lets things sort of stagnate, or like he's holding on to like the past in a way almost, even though he's got like normally the perspective of train yourself to let go of what you fear to lose. It's like he is holding things like in like he's grounding it in his perspective, or like his perception rather of like the way that things should work. He is like, you can't think that this is what the Chancellor wants to do. Yeah. And Mace very correctly says, what he wants is irrelevant. We know there's a Sith, operating here. They don't know it's him. They don't know that he is the Sith. But the fact that they know that intelligence, Yoda, like, get on my level here. You know what I mean? It's like, I totally get what he's talking about right there. That's the one thing I say Mace is right about that.
Yeah, even outside
it's
of
one of the downsides of
machinations,
having
though.
such an absurdly long... Sorry.
So sorry, Evan, you go.
It's fine.
Having a very long lifespan, I believe he was going to get.
Yeah, well, definitely, and I like the fact that Yoda's able to put that aside because of his Jedidom. He's not someone who's he is affected by it, but he's not blinded by it. He keeps that sense of perspective.
Well,
but also
by the end, he does.
Of course,
of course. In this sequence,
he still struggles with it on occasion. But he has good reason to, because he's not exactly. It's not like any of that perspective is damaging. It's almost always a right. It's just it's not the best thing to solve this particular problem. But the thing I like as well is that, like Matt said, it is the Sith, of course, the real threat. But it's not just that. Right now, this situation today, they are passing a political order, an amendment to the Constitution that will give Palpatine's office direct control of the order. So it's not like Yoda when he says, the Senate would never pass that. It's not. It's about to not be the Senate's decision. It's about to be purely in this one office. So even regardless of the Sith presence, if Palpatine decides to do something, he now can, which is what they're discussing and how they're going to deal with that. Yeah. What do we do about the problem with Palpatine?
And he brings up the prospect of having him removed from office, and we see Obi-Wan's like, removed?
Yeah. This is where his kind of reaction steps in. It's like, you haven't been here. You don't get this right now, but it's important. Which again helps run damage control for another criticism, saying, why would they be so aggressive in trying to arrest Palpatine? And this kind of helps explain the dire situation that they're in and why they feel motivated to take such drastic action. They didn't do this on a whim. This is literally sink or swim. Yeah, they had the pieces were in place before the situation evolved into what it did. They had legitimate reasons for fearing him before they realised he was a Sith. This is and it makes sense. Mace addresses the fact that yes, this is treason, but I will commit treason if it's the best thing for the for the galaxy.
I'm not afraid of
It's
words.
the
Obi-Wan.
truest paladin.
Precisely,
Yes.
and he's not wrong. It's not like he's gone off the deep end. He's gone too far. He's been broken by a situation.
No.
He is not wrong. They are all right
He
in
is
their own
not
ways.
wrong. Yeah.
Wait, so that makes me
And-
wonder. Wait, what is this not the scene that you had a
No,
issue with?
that's
Is it
what I
later?
wanted. That's what I wanted to say before. This is not my problem with. I can't
Oh,
even
this
find
is
the damn
something
quote.
else.
I want
To give
I'll
some
have
context, guys, we were having a discussion before we
Oh,
recorded
right.
this.
Yeah, I had a
about
note
a
written
Mace
down
sequence
from
that
ages
Callan
ago when
wanted
we
to talk
first read
about.
this stuff that Mace
Yeah.
there was a specific 2-line bit where Mace said something that I was like, okay, that's too far. That doesn't fit. That doesn't fit Mace's voice. And it was a miswritten bit for me, but I couldn't find it for the life of me the second time. So I'm either making it up or it's very, very, very small. But it wasn't this at all. Mace is brilliant here. He's absolutely right while also being wrong. So I love it.
Right. I'm not saying I want to be careful because I'm not saying that if Mace had like command of like the order that like they definitely would have won here because Yoda's right. If had they just arrested the chancellor, then they would have had a whole there'd been political fallout and a whole another set of problems to deal with, and who knows where that could have spiraled into.
Yeah.
But what you have here is not so much. It's not like Mace's way would have given the order an out. But what he's saying would have prevented them playing right into Sidious's hands by basically following the playbook he set out for them, which is what Yoda's allowing to happen, in an ironic way. It's like
it would have flipped the table.
Mace isn't. Yeah, he's not necessarily guaranteeing victory. He's just trying not to have their hands so obviously tied, and that's why I don't want to say I side with him completely in this argument, but I lean toward his perspective a lot because I can,
Giving
for out
him
of
more of a
universe
fighting
reasons, it's
chance.
easy because what happens, of course. But I mean, even in universe, I totally get where he's coming from without my foreknowledge. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, if you were a council member in that meeting, you would have leant towards that choice. You would have gone, okay, let's take that risk. It's the more viable option here. It's not a good option, but it's the best option we have, kind of thing.
Leadership, when you have to deal with them, it's you don't know what you're really. You can't see the future. Even a Jedi, always in motion the future is. But having to make those hard decisions. Mace is that kind of person. Where he's willing to make that gamble if he thinks it's necessary.
That's why I love these scenes. This is the human flaw stuff that I like with the Jedi. The Jedi cannot be flawless. That's terrible writing. But when they are flawed, it needs to be believable. It needs to be powerful. It needs to fit their philosophical perspective. They cannot just be idiots. It does not fit. This is the strength of this kind of situation for me. It's adding that emotional and narrative weight to their decision making as leaders of the Order, as leaders of the galaxy, really. Because it's pointed out here. It's one of my favorite parts in the chapter. They're not a legal authority. They're a moral authority. They will do what is right. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what else what the Senate does. But at the same time, Yoda, who said that, is also the one who's speaking towards the legal defense.
Right.
They can't. Yeah. He can't. He can, but he doesn't choose to separate himself from the Senate.
Which is a bit of an odd line when you consider that there have been Jedi chancellors, but that just might be a continuity.
It's
it's EU,
right? Yeah.
One thing that should be said about the Jedi chancellors is that there haven't been any Jedi chancellors since the Ruusan reformations, because during the wars with the Sith, things got so bad that the Jedi basically took control of the government to conduct the war effort, and there were Jedi chancellors because they needed them at the time. But then after the reformations, because the Sith were no longer a threat, the Jedi pretty much absented themselves from government and served at the pleasure of the Senate.
More important as well is the fact that them also being a legal authority in the traditional sense doesn't separate them from being that moral one as well. They can be both. It's just you can't be legal only as a Jedi, which is what the point Yoda's making there.
Well, that's even something that Luke tried to do with his council. Later on, his original Jedi Council was half Jedi, half politicians, and that eventually dissolved itself because of the differing ideologies. That and the New Republic was corrupt as hell at that time, but it showcases the
Sorry, my bad.
No, it's fine. Go ahead. I was just wrapping up.
No, it's tied to that point though. It's one of those things that fits perfectly in a narrative sense. It's a really good bit of drama to apply to any story in Star Wars because. Politicians, government in general, it has to be by definition corrupt. You cannot have an uncorrupt government and have it function. It's how society works. It's not a bad thing as long as it's managed. But the Jedi can't be corrupt. They have to be completely pure and perfect in terms of their moral sanctity, because that's what it means to be a Jedi. So you can never pair those two together.
You put those two into a debate in a Senate, and
Yeah, they're the moral check against the Senate. It works good on a systematic level, but then when you also add the pollution of the Sith, who take it to ludicrous extremes, the political corruption, then the Jedi are at that impasse, and this order is so connected to the galaxy and how it works, and the everyday life of every citizen, not just the grand stakes of political drama in the Senate. The average farmer on that far off planet will fall into slavery if the Republic collapses. That makes that point here. So
that's Yeah, I like that because it shows why Mace sort of has like the short term view, because he can see the real world effects of what will have on like the average citizen. Like, should the Republic fall, everything that I've seen, like on the precipice of like civilization, out beyond that into that like dark veil, that will come here. That will just be standard.
Yeah,
that cannot happen. Like that's like his like view. And like, law be damned. Like, that's like the call I serve. You know what I mean? And it's not like Yoda's like, I'm all about the law. Yoda just sees the legal fallout, and he can see like the threat that poses. So he has like the long term view in that sense. So that's what I mean. It's so intricate and well done, and you can follow both perspectives perfectly.
Yeah, the different levels of crisis management. Mace talking about it's interesting how they're both dealing with the long and short term on both sides of their perspective, because Mace, that's the long term issue Mace is fearing, right? And he needs to take short term action to stop that. Whereas Yoda's thinking about the long term action, the long term ramifications as well, just on the different level, and postponing the short term action. I like how each perspective is kind of nuanced and unique, as well as slightly opposing. Each one is multi-layered, even if it was just their own opinion in isolation. But also, it's another bit of damage control for the story of Star Wars in the main saga, because he's addressing the point of slavery and how it's always been a criticism of the first film in the saga that slavery exists, on the fringes. Why did the Jedi let that happen? And the reason is because they can't do everything. They cannot physically deal with every problem in the galaxy. They have to have some form of limitation, to function as any organization, even if they weren't Jedi. So this kind of helps address why they're connected to the Republic, because it enables them to do that. It gives them the facility to take, definitive action in situations that they need to, like the slavery problem. And I like that it's addressing that here. It's it's already happening out there. We do not want it here. This is civilization. We do not want it to proliferate across the galaxy. Any form of slavery.
Well, it's interesting because a common criticism that some fans bring up is like, why aren't the Jedi completely divorced from the Republic in its entirety? And this chapter kind of showcases, like, if they were to do that, it would completely, their ability to do good would be hampered significantly.
Yeah, I mean, what are they going to do? If a planet goes to war with another planet when they're not a part of the Republic, what do? They go in and just forcibly just take over everything and then leave again? They can't do that. They have to be a part of the government to have any form of lasting impact in the galaxy as a whole, which is Yoda's perspective. This is the way it's always been, and he's not just saying it because it's the way it's always been. He's saying it's always been this way because it's the right way, and so we have to keep with that. It's not just
maybe they don't have to put the temple on Coruscant, but they definitely should be connected.
Yeah, they need to have some connection
without
to
saying.
it. They have to have a presence in the capital. They just need to. So yeah, it's brilliant stuff. And to say nothing of the emotional connection they have between the Jedi. As we said before, they each bow in respect by the end of it. They say, you have seen the way, Obi-Wan. Yes, we got frustrated, and yes, of course, you were being the negotiator again, but you found the middle way. You are correct. We bow to your wisdom. Thank you for giving us some clarity. And it makes sense because one, he's Obi-Wan, and two, he's been away. This is he's only freshly coming into this.
I also like the little callback to like Qui-Gon in that, and like through Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon has like a little bit of a voice in terms of influencing the way this conversation between masters goes. I think that's cool.
Yeah, on a thematic, personal level,
becomes actual. It is only a distraction.
I'd like to say that this conversation is also, it perfectly illustrates, like referencing the D&D alignment, just how radically different lawful good individuals can be. Because every single person in this room I would consider to be lawful good. Totally different perspectives, having that same kind of guiding principle.
I hate the alignment so much.
But
you hate what?
I hate those alignments so much for that exact reason. But that's a whole separate issue. But I agree with what you're saying.
I think I like the point though, like how similar you can be with still having nuanced differences and different takes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, with that taken care of, should we move into Grievous?
Yes, yeah, we'll move into the
different.
This brings into the different kind of ideas of the Masters, because it's not all Jedi Masters. As Matt said earlier, I like that's the first lead-in because it's the obvious thought that comes to mind when you say Masters in the Star Wars context. But yeah, Grievous' mastery over Gunray, Sidious's mastery over Grievous, more importantly. You know,
And
Anakin's
it
chasing
takes
of
on-
mastery. It works.
Yeah, right. He's pursuing it, and it takes on a different context because when a Jedi calls another Jedi master, it's like more like an honorific. Like, okay, I'm respecting your mastery of like the Force and your craft and everything. Sidious is like Grievous's master. Like he's looking at the hem of his robe. Like, oh, bow down
As
to you,
is
I'm your
appropriate.
slave.
That's all he needs
You know?
to see. Yeah.
Right. It's like the word master can have like a very dark connotation, you know. So I like the way that the book doesn't have to come out and say that. You just get that from like the different that you take that from like the different ways that the scenes are played. And like Gunray, when you think about like what this war has been for the galaxy, what's he worried about right now? Money. You know, it's like he's like his leash, like the thing that he answers to is like that greed, like, and it's like it's fucking money, and it's like really like I get that it's in character, it's not a problem, but it just shows how despicable these people are. It's like that's what they're thinking about
And
after all that's happened.
It's also
Yeah,
a perfect example
showcases
of how the
Grievous
Clone Wars.
disconnect.
It's also a perfect example of how the Clone Wars itself was a shades of gray conflict between two equally reprehensible sides that both had some good points, some bad, but things could have gone either way. And it's also a perfect example of how the Clone Wars itself was essentially a win-win situation, because no matter which side won, Sidious always had direct control over them, and was always in a position where he could turn that group from a shades of gray into something completely horrifying.
I like as well how the chapter is all wrapped together in this nice kind of blanket umbrella. You know, this is a long chapter, as you said earlier, Matt, and it jumps between so many different people. But it's not aside from the whole different connotations of master and what it can mean. You've got this this representation of greed, as you said, open and just flowing greed, followed quickly by Anakin's discussion with Yoda, which discusses the shadow of greed. You know, there are different bits and pieces woven between this in this chapter that kind of connect it to an overall whole. It's again that kind of mini episodic effect that we talk about in other reviews. I really like it when it does that. And it's a good scene between Grievous and Sidious, you know, just on the basic level, the discussion they have and how he's, you know, questioning, as we said before, the earlier situation with the battle. He's like, why, you know, if I may be so bold,
let me kill the Chancellor.
Yeah.
It's also a perfect example of the similarities between Grievous and Darth Vader, in fact, in that these are both individuals who fully acknowledge that they're not really suited to lead. What they want to do is take orders. Like Grievous straight up says, I was never one for Dejarik. I always preferred real war. It's like, you know, he needs things to do. He can't just rule.
Yeah,
definitely.
He lives for conflict. Rolls back to that disconnect. Also, I just want to mention this while we're here too. They talk about how the Mustafar base, you know, was constructed specifically to withstand the entire Republic Navy, one of the most secure locations in the galaxy. I like that they emphasize that because, again, another criticism from the films: how did Vader get in so easily, and why is Mustafar so undefended? Actually, it is.
Yeah,
So,
it is. He would just.
I like that they highlight.
Yeah.
Well, I always
Yeah.
figured
Got
that
the
Anakin
codes.
was kind of supposed to be there because he was, you know,
Given
sent by
clearance.
Palpatine. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
precisely.
Supposed
That's
to be
but that's
Darth
why it
Vader
makes
at that
sense.
time.
Yeah, but that's why it makes sense. Yeah, but also another thing
I
you
was
don't get across
thinking
in the
of the
films 'cause
guy
it doesn't
from
feel
Micro
like that.
Series who was like, it can withstand an army of Jedi. Like when but when Grievous was like, it can withstand 1,000 Jedi, 10,000. You know, it's like, but wait.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you sound
When
like that
when
guy
Newt
now.
when Newt Gunray is the one going, "Do you hear yourself?"
Yeah.
you know that he's bullshitting.
Yeah.
And the fact that it nearly bankrupted the Trade Federation as well, that's an astronomical amount of money
Yeah.
thrown into that one fortress. But we never see that in the film. It just looks like it's a foundry planet that's just nothing to do with anything.
That's what
It's
I
a
mean.
secreted
Yeah,
away
it's so
location.
unimpressive.
Yeah, no fleet, no fortress, no anything.
The sequence
It's just-
literally opens with people on farming lava.
Yeah.
I'm like, really?
But hey, you know, it adds a bit
Yeah.
more tension to the situation, I suppose.
Did make for a fun level on Battlefront 2.
Yes, definitely.
Nostalgia.
I love that bridge. Just wait for them to walk across it, and then boop.
Is there anything
Below the console.
anybody else wanted to talk about with regard to the Grievous stuff?
No, not
or
particularly.
moving
Well, a lot of
Aside
things
from
to say
the
about
plot,
Grievous.
aside from the
Yeah,
plot
yeah.
point of them
I
moving
mean,
them to
character-wise,
Mustafar.
it's pretty much a direct carryover from
Yeah,
the Invisible
it
Man
is.
stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't really add
I thought so
At-
too. I just
at-
wondered if anyone had anything to say.
Yeah,
But
no.
so that takes us back to Anakin then.
Yes.
with Palpatine. Yeah.
Fingers coming through his hair as he walks up the.
Is it
wait,
Yoda
Yoda?
first? No, it's
No,
Yoda
no,
first.
Yoda.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Wait,
it's
huh?
Yoda first. Because he's having his dreams and he wants to speak to someone about them.
Right.
Oh yeah. It's
and what he
Anakin
should
going
do
to
about it.
Yoda. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Premonitions. Yeah.
I do
Let me
like
put on my Jedi card about premonitions. Yeah.
Yes, Matt
That's
loves this.
that's the problem with the
That
scene
scene.
as a whole, because as we said many times before in different situations, he just spews Jedi platitudes. But the thing I like about the Stover interpretation of the scene rather than the film one is that at least the lead-in is pleasant. You know, we get description set up in the previous scene with the Masters. The room itself is very Yoda. You know, it speaks of tranquility. It speaks of a sense of presence in the Force. Even to Anakin, whose Force senses are known to be less than perfect. Or less than refined, it still has that calming effect. And more importantly than that, Yoda's personal connection. He doesn't, brush him off, even though he's clearly got other things to worry about. He lets him in, he lets him sit for a bit, and they just meditate on the Force together. The platitudes come, and it's not a particularly good scene even here, but at least the lead-in is the right kind of tone for the person he is.
And that's the kind of scene I'm talking about, where I think that'd be really hard to adapt on screen. Is like it goes through the business of like Anakin is so relieved that Yoda's going to hear him out that he's like crying. He has to compose himself before he can have his conversation. And I go, that'd be really hard to play that on screen without Yoda going, something wrong, Skywalker. What's wrong with you? But it works in the context of a novel. I don't question it. It would be really hard to play that on film though for me.
Yeah, how do you
back
focus
to
the
the
shots
scene setting?
without
I want to just
distorting it?
reflect the scene setting because of what you said, Callan, because it's actually contrasted in the next scene with Palpatine and the way in which Anakin's reflecting that situation, how he harkens it back to him on the invisible hand and the throne, the very severe throne and the red carpeting similar to his guards, and then you have this which is the foreshadow, or at least the scene prior to it, a very different kind of setting. So I think he used setting very well to set that up before there's any dialogue.
He's alarmed
and he's
by
alarmed by
Palpatine.
it.
Even obviously he gets pushed aside because Anakin, he does get that
Right.
feel. He's not blind to any of this by any means. He's just it's kind of a case of choosing what he wants to see, because this doesn't help validate me. I'm going forward.
But going to I know you guys have criticisms on Yoda and his platitudes of Jedi-isms, but for me, it kind of works only because Yoda has been part of the Order so long, and he kind of is those. Those things. You know what I mean?
That's what I wish it would have been. I wish it would have been.
Played
I've
on
not
purpose.
lost people before in my 800 years. I've dealt with this. I'm not asking you to do anything I haven't done myself. That should have been the message. In the
I've
way
seen
it's
so many
played,
people go. Right.
It needs
the way
to be
it's
the
played.
Dark
They
Rendezvous
needed the
scene.
scene from Rendezvous. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Dark Rendezvous scene with Scout. That was the scene that they needed to play here, and it wasn't, unfortunately. But because that's where Yoda's disconnect
I think
comes.
Yoda
He's not
means what he says.
Yeah,
it's not
he does.
like he's spewing Jedi platitudes just to spew them. He means it. It's just
precisely. It's
know,
just the
know
wrong
your
audience.
audience.
Yeah, know your audience. Precisely.
Yeah, the problem is that what you need with Anakin to get through to him is frank talk. You can't give him platitudes and expect him to understand. You actually got to spell things out for him. And the sad thing is that that's part of the reason for how Palpatine has been able to manipulate him so thoroughly for so long. It's because Palpatine's weapon has always been frank, honest talk. Even
And he
though
speaks in layman terms the entire time he
Yeah.
speaks to Anakin. He doesn't try to speak in nebulous terms.
He's the one
Yeah,
person he
basically
doesn't
everything-
dress things up for. But even aside from that, it's the fact that he understands Anakin's motivations. The Jedi are
Right.
always focusing, understandably and justifiably so, on what Anakin should be, what he needs to be in the eyes of being a Jedi. But Anakin doesn't care about that to an extent. This kind of situation would have played perfectly for Obi-Wan. If it was Obi-Wan coming in worrying about Siri, for example, then this would fly immediately, and it would fly for both of them. But with Anakin,
I mean,
it's
it
not
kinda
going
did.
to work.
Yeah.
It did, yeah.
You have two key ingredients there with the way that Palpatine presents the message, and what was the other one? Anakin sort of being open to the way that he the frank talk, right? That Connor mentioned.
Yeah.
And then there's but then the other thing is Palpatine, the key third one. Palpatine is not telling him you can't have it. He's telling him you can have what you want. And of course, that's going to be the ultimate temptation for anybody. Who's going to side with, the limitation of not being able to have what you want over the possibility that if I just reach out and take it, it's mine. That's Palpatine's perspective about everything. Everything he does, even putting Anakin on the council as his representative, he doesn't need them. He knows what they're doing. They're playing into his hands. He's doing that to get to Anakin.
Yep.
He's just giving him he's just manipulating. That's all he's doing.
It's as well
So,
tied
yeah,
to
like,
those
Anakin-
twin perspective of Sith and Jedi. Like you say, he reaches out and takes it. You know, that's Palpatine's perspective.
Yeah.
That's what he's offering Anakin. That's what he's saying. Look what you can do with the dark. You know, he's not actively painting it at that yet because Anakin's not. You know, what did he say to Grievous? Time is not ripe. But
Pretty much is, but like pretty full on
Yeah.
almost. But yeah, we
But
get into that. But yeah, he's it is like. Sorry, go ahead. I lost my train of thought.
sorry, I was just saying
Go
that he just needed. You know, he needs a little bit more time to refine it because he's not. If he just threw it at him right now, there's at least a chance it would be rejected. So he's not quite
Right.
ready yet.
That's
But-
what I was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't like it when people say that like Anakin had no chance because that like takes the onus off him and his decision making skills as like a person like with thoughts like he should have I don't like it when people give him the excuse of the Jedi turned him like or by being Jedi. It's like no, like Anakin is a person. He can make his own. He can put his big boy pants on and make his own decisions. But it isn't a fair contest because Palpatine has he has a stacked deck. You know what I mean? Like he's got an easier time talking to Anakin and giving this message than the Jedi ever could have had because they're conveying an uncomfortable or unfortunate reality. Palpatine's coming on with fantasies. Have all this, you know.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
Yeah, and also the fact
But the
that
funny thing is that the Jedi Order are bringing on an unfortunate reality, but they're doing so with platitudes, which themselves are very difficult to apply to reality, whereas Palpatine is delivering fantasies with frank, honest talk, something very mundane, something very straightforward. So it's just the fact that another example of how the Sith and the dark side are mirrors of each other and kind of use a lot of the same tricks just turned on their head.
It's a reflection of that choice again. You know, if again put Obi-Wan in Anakin's situation, he's going to go with the Jedi every time. It's that personal character. You know, Anakin. This is where he's flawed. He can't be selfless. He's inherently selfish in his nature, and not always to his detriment. You know, that's not inherently a bad thing. But when you don't have that, as Yoda says, that disconnect, that ability to let go, even Padme touches on it. You know, with the whole duty to the galaxy that they have beyond their own relationship. Anakin can't even comprehend that, let alone address it or come to any kind of actual realization himself and take action on it. So what Palpatine offers him is going to be bound up. But more important than anything here, I think, is the fact that the book is actively taking steps here. And in this, following sequence to address why Anakin wants mastery. As we said before, he's not interested. I mean, in a childish kind of way, he has that feeling of pride and ambition, but he doesn't care about the rank in terms of the respect or the opinions of the council. Or the galaxy. He doesn't care about that. He doesn't need that. What he wants it for is access directly to the holocron that will provide the knowledge he needs to save Padme.
Yeah.
Everything is tied to Padme with him, and it's. Again, we say his relationship to her is completely mental, but at least the motivation holds water. You know, it fits why he's so desperate for this situation to come, and that's why he can just so easily cast his better half aside because it's for Padme. I will do anything for Padme.
Yeah, he's nuts, but you get where he's coming from. Like if that's the goal, then yeah. Like when Mace later threatens Palpatine, you're threatening Padme. So the choice is clear. That's Anakin's brain. You know.
The other thing to consider is the fact that it represents how possessive Anakin is of Padme, but also how submissive he is to her. Because the thing is that if Padme had ever ordered him to do something or had voiced her approval at his decision to destroy the Jedi Order,
oh yeah, can you imagine if she'd gone for being the Emperor? She would be that, benevolent dictator he'd happily submit to.
She would have had total control over him. She would have had him completely. If Padme was a femme fatale, she would have had Anakin completely wrapped around her finger.
Mm-hmm.
That's a scary prospect.
I mean, is it scarier than what actually happened? Debatable, but yeah, it's attached to his motivation. Everything that happens here is about Anakin, or at least at this part of the chapter, is about Anakin's turn and why it makes sense now. Because originally it kind of didn't, or if it did, it was very flimsy and loose and ridiculous.
It's not. It's like the same beats are there, but like I said, like things get lost in translation. Like you're not. I don't really feel like you have like strong reasons to empathize with him in film, like in here or in this version of the story, which is it's the same story. It's just more nuanced and more flavored, and you get where he's coming from. That moment later on what? Like, I'm not I'm not a master. Like, that makes a lot more sense. It's not just petulant child, arguing.
Yeah, this is the chapter that points out in the specific line. He's not some petulant child that would throw a tantrum. It actually says something along those lines, which I love. He's actively, as we said before, parodying and mocking the film, while also giving the solution to that problem at the same time. So I like how self-aware he is of the problems of the film.
Is there anything else we want to talk about with the Yoda stuff, or do we move on?
Well, I like the bridging scene between him and Obi-Wan kind of laying it down, saying that it's not just that I'm asking you, like, as a council person or as a Jedi, like, I truly mean this as, like, a friend of yours and someone who's, like, kind of been a brother of yours coming up. Don't trust Palpatine. Like, that's a big card to pull. Like, you don't pull that on your friends, like, every day. Like, that's something that is very paramount. And I like that's the reason why when we segue into the Palpatine scene, Anakin is able to kind of see the office for what it truly is, like the office of a Sith Lord. But like you said, Kellen, like, Anakin, he kind of just Anakins himself out of that situation and gets manipulated. But I mean, at the start, he does see it.
Yeah, the threat registers for a minute thanks to the clarity that Obi-Wan's provided. He's like, so no of courses, no of courses. Think for a moment. Just think and be careful, not mindful, careful. I love that.
We have to give him the credit for trying, because, like, there's many times where we could say, like, he just didn't bother, but, like, here he is trying to he not even, like, just his duty, but just, like, common sense or just not, I don't want to call it self-preservation, but just, like, for the common good, like, please do this, you know. And Palpatine, ever the brilliant chess master, he starts, like, sowing seeds of doubt in, like, the council's, reasons, like, for doing this, like, at the exact right time, to as, like, a counterbalance to that. Like, okay, I want you to apply the same thought to them that they've asked you to apply to me. And any other Jedi that wouldn't work, but it works on Anakin, and it makes sense for it to. It's not just Anakining, it's like the influence that Palpatine has on him. It makes sense.
And the sense as well, obviously the personal manipulation is absolutely paramount here, as it should be, but also the fact that this is kind of a quasi-force nexus of darkness in of itself. It makes sense that Anakin, even though he's had this threat registered and immediately as he steps in the room, on top of the stuff that's being fed to him by Palpatine, he's in this, this well of darkness. This is where he's going to be. Palpatine specifically says it's not like any Sith Lord is going to walk through that door, Anakin, and it's like, ha ha ha, as he is one. This there has to be some sort of further connection at play here.
This is, like, very like on the nose kind of stuff, like where, like, he's, like, twisting his non-existent mustache, like, like playing that trollish villain card. But I do like the that note that you mentioned where what he's doing really is he's sort of introducing the notion, like when he mentions, like, if the Sith Lord was to come, like, I would ask him, like, do you have a way to end this war? Like, he paints himself as, like, the ultimate pragmatist. You know what I mean? And he's sowing that seed, like, in Anakin, not even of doubt in the order, but rather, if it's power, light or dark, what do you care from where it comes from?
Right.
Like, if it gets you what you want.
What's the care for morality is what he's really like putting out.
What matters is
which
order.
is more effective than what Yoda was trying to do to him in the previous. Like he's doing it subtly now, because eventually he's going to come out and be like, "Oh, Dark Lord, this is what we do." But at this point, it's more of like, well, just consider it. And he's doing, and that's what's really good if you're trying to persuade someone. You don't do it in one conversation. You don't do it straight off the bat. You have to just do it bit by bit. And you have to do it, day by day until finally then you break it to that person. And by that time, that has already been, festering in someone's brain, and they're more likely to be susceptible to whatever it is that you're trying to have them do.
And you also don't tell them, you ask
classic
them.
and operate condition.
Yes, you don't tell them, you ask.
The Jedi,
part of it.
The Jedi, the way of the Jedi, and in really the right way, as long as you're dealing with the right person, is to go, this is the truth. Look at it. You can see it. I don't have to explain why it's the truth. You can objectively see this. Why wouldn't you go with it? Now do it. With Palpatine, it's like, well, wouldn't you want to ask them to, how to help? I would sit him down and I'd get him a bloody brandy, because, if he can help make peace, then that's fine. He's presenting the idea that that he is the peaceable person. He's the one who would reach out the olive branch if it was, the right thing to do. He's not, obviously, but it's another bit of that little seed that'll be planted later for when when the Jedi start to get hardline and get aggressive for good reason with the Senate and with Palpatine. He'll be like, but
See what they're doing?
Yeah, Palpatine isn't. See what happened here. Palpatine wasn't like that. Palpatine said he would extend an olive branch to even the Sith. So clearly, he's more, of sound mind. So it's all this little small little stuff that's just dotted throughout. And Anakin's just ripe for the taking because he's in the situation where he's so desperate.
The other thing that makes it work so well is the fact that at this point, Anakin has no inkling that Palpatine is a Force sensitive, and every single thing that Palpatine's saying can be construed as something that a normal person would think and something that a politician would think. So he's not questioning the subtle Sith ideology coming from him, because it just seems like the mundane ideology of an everyday person, which Palpatine is presenting himself as.
Yeah, it's common parlance. It's not this grand scheme to him, because of course it's not. He's just a normal person. He's not an evil Sith, presence in the universe.
I do like the foreshadow, because at the beginning of the scene, when he approaches him and he knows that he's there, he's like, "Oh, he must have seen me through the mirror or through the window." But really, it's like, Anakin. "Oh no, like he thought you in the Force coming." So that's pretty cool.
Of course, anyone can tell, like, if somebody else walks into a room, but he knows it's me. He just, Anakin, like, without looking. I love that. That's really good stuff.
It's a really cool little detail.
And I like that what Palpatine's doing is not so much like just steamrolling over Anakin with like just blind manipulation and like this fool will follow me. He's probing, like he's testing the waters. He's like, okay, so he's not ready to like just
accept
for me to talk too much shit about the Jedi yet.
Right,
Let's switch it over back to just let's talk about power. Like let's talk about let's talk about pragmatism. Forget the anti-Jedi rhetoric for now, because you're not ready for that. So I like that that to me is where I like to that's what I celebrate Palpatine for, like as like good villainy, or whether I like the way that he does that. He's not just like the plot just plays the way I need it to, because it does. He takes active measures, like to he plays the people. He plays like an instrument. Like just because one instrument doesn't mean you can do every instrument. He's like he's acclimated to like, what do I need to do to make you do this? I like that.
How do I make you sing?
It's so well. Yeah,
it's his responsiveness, as you say. It's his reactionary take on all of the individual parts. Yes, he is the master schemer that is putting all of these pieces in play, but they're not all going to act exactly how he initially planned. It's not all according to Kengeku here. It's a case of him looking at the characters, looking at like they said, testing the waters. Here he goes, okay, prod here, Anakin's not responding, okay, we'll back a bit. But even though he's pushed further beforehand as well, I like that it's not in sequence. He can push Anakin further on issues with the Jedi sometimes, but he's just come from a discussion with Obi-Wan, specifically designed to put him into this kind of mindset of clarity, focus and self-awareness. So he's like, okay, not right now. You were earlier, so I thought you were a bit further along, but maybe not now. And it's always a case of what's happening with the character in front of him, not his grand plan in mind. And it's so well done. It's so well like written out, and not on tongue in cheek on the nose stuff. Even when it is being tongue in cheek on the nose, like with the Sith mention.
Right.
Yeah.
It is liquid, manipulation.
Yeah, what makes it work is like that tongue-in-cheek stuff is not the point of the scene.
Right.
That's just added flavor. Had that been the point, it would have just been like, okay, this is just camp and cheese. Like we don't need that. But I mean, when you integrate it into like the overall narrative here, yeah, pretty good, pretty good stuff.
We don't need the Ian grin.
Not right now, no. That'll come later.
It will come later.
Oh god, we're going to get to that scene at some point. Anyway, yeah, so moving on to the last bit of the wrap-up here with the last 2 pages.
This is basically just...
Anakin just kind of, setting his goals.
Yeah, it's Palpatine, like, waving that carrot, like, oh, you don't think you can be on the council? We'll see about that.
Yeah.
I have a way with people, or whatever he says,
And all it takes is for me to, maybe properly explain it to them. I like the lead into that, how he's undermining their authority in both the political sense ahead of this, and also the personal sense, and like, I have the authority of the council. You can trust me, Anakin. I know what I'm talking about. I know more than them. It's just such a nice bit of paving for what will come later in the chapter, and later in the book rather. But yeah, don't want to waffle too long on this one, guys. We've spoken enough about this, I think. Ready to wrap up?
Yeah, it's a little more varied this time, because it wasn't all roses and unicorns, but it's still very good, because I think it does a very good. This section does a very good job of communicating why it is that we should understand the motivations of Anakin. I think this is the particular section of the book that helps do that for the lead in of all that. And also like the master chapter being a very good representation of all types of mastery, how mastery can be a form of fear, of respect and love, that kind of thing. So I think they did. Stover again does a very good job with hearts and minds, as Matthew puts it. So yeah, like this is going pretty well. Save for the Padme stuff, it's going pretty good.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And
little stumble, but overall solid.
Yeah,
The
and
thing I would take away.
Oh, sorry, carry on.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh,
I was gonna say like.
I was just going to say, jumping
I
off
insist.
Sorry, I was just saying, jumping off Antoine's point. I love everything about that, what you just said, Antoine, but also how he weaves that into the narrative. It's not just let's take a step back and just discuss the characters and pause the plot. Everything that's going on in relation to their development and their growth and their discussions is specific to the plot and specific to how the story is going to progress. It's nice that he can weave it in without disjointing or disrupting the flow of the story. I love that. It's my favorite thing about him.
He's given the characters act. Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. I was done. It's my favorite thing about him.
I was just gonna say he unlike the film, he's giving the characters and the situation agency.
Absolutely. And again, unlike someone like Lucino, he's not pausing the play. He's not
Right.
pressing pause to do that.
It's natural. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And like my takeaway from this is that it's a relatively rare, because I should say this, I don't like the Clone Wars series very much. It's just not for me. But as a person, by and large, I think Anakin's fairly likable there. But this, in the pre-TCW era, this is one of the instances where I don't want to say he's like likable, but like I'm firmly able to empathize with Anakin. Yeah. Like throughout this portion of the book. And considering how old the book is, that's valuable, because like this goes back to like when the film came out. Like I've been able to do this for this long with this character, primarily for this reason. And the other big thing, very much like the entirety of the plot for Labyrinth of Evil, my big takeaway from this section of the book is getting the Jedi perspective. Oh, these are characters that make sense. They're not just like plot contrivances like that do nothing on screen. So if you haven't read the book, I advise that. I advise it for a multitude of reasons, but this portion specifically for that's what you'll get out of reading this, is the Jedi perspective, which is needed,
Absolutely. At the end of every video part we're doing for this, we're recommending the book again and again. So I love that no small part of this is like, he's like, okay, this part of the book you can maybe skip. I love that it's all relevant, all powerful. It's so rare in a book of this length and this depth.
The other thing is that going back to how this whole section represents different forms of mastery, is that it actually does a good job of giving us everyone's perspective. Like, we're not just seeing the way the Jedi are looking at things and what they're trying to achieve. We're also getting a look into Palpatine's thought process with his manipulation of Anakin and how he's trying to encourage Anakin to think. And I think we can all rest assured that is more or less how Palpatine views the world. And then we also see how Grievous himself is pretty much an expression of the hierarchy that he's part of. He exists to take orders from this guy and keep these guys in line.
We get to see the perspective from all of the various masters of war throughout this conflict. And I think that's a good bit to wrap up on, guys, because we've got a lot to discuss in the next chapter directly relating to the politics of the galaxy anyway. So we'll talk about that more next time. If you would like to discuss anything more than we have already, although I'm pretty sure we've done a pretty good job with this one this time, please put it down in the comments down below. Give us your thoughts and opinions on it yourself as well. Looking forward to reading them. I am Rutty4, and I still don't have an outro.
Gridget91, thanks for watching.
Evanova95, we hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys later.
Gensarai1, may the Force serve you well.
Antoine Bandele, peace, love, and remember, may the Force be with you.
Always.
Dun, dun, dun.